He woke up in an isekai and realized that he was inside the game he used to play. 3 years earlier, he had possessed a character from the game called Heroic Legend of Arhan. The game involved many dangerous events that took place inside an academy, with large-scale conflicts and even the end of the world. It was a huge story, but that was never a problem, because the protagonist always solved everything in the end. However, he was not the protagonist. His role was Korin Lok, a common NPC, used in an early quest in which the main character saved a villager. Nothing more than that. For him, it was simple. If the story followed exactly the same path as the game, everything would be resolved without difficulty. Because of that, Korin Lok simply observed the protagonist, Park Si-ho, believing that he would become famous, powerful, and rich. Everything seemed normal until they reached the starting point. There, a man dressed entirely in black appeared, with a strange appearance, talking about soda. Korin Lok found it odd because soda did not exist in that world. The man talked about efficiency, saying that it was essential for survival. At that moment, Korin Lok grabbed his hand and revealed that he was also a player. At that time, Park Si-ho was still just an ordinary person who had possessed a character inside the game. The main difference between them was that Park Si-ho had an exclusive player privilege, the so-called status window. The problem was that he had never played that game before. Korin Lok, on the other hand, knew everything. He had played all routes, all events, and all possible stories. He was practically an expert. Because of that, he decided to teach everything he knew. Having someone like him guiding the way was an absurd advantage. Park Si-ho learned quickly, and the combination was perfect. One had all the information about the game, while the other had the system and the status window. Together, they seemed unbeatable. Korin Lok believed that, at Park Si-ho's side, it would be possible to save many people, prevent the end of the world, and in the end, return to Earth. During this journey, after a long battle, Park Si-ho offered him an elixir. While drinking it, Korin Lok noticed something that deeply bothered him. Their group was made up only of men, all muscular and sweaty. He knew that the charm of that game was in its fantasy, especially in the heroines. Even more so because there was a dating simulation system. However, Park Si-ho never got involved with any woman. He only added them to the group when it was absolutely necessary, and then dismissed them. Over time, the group became exclusively male, which made Korin Lok question, even if respectfully, the reason for that. At that moment, he should have been suspicious already. The granddaughter of the Sword Emperor died on the way to the entrance ceremony. The final boss of the first stage, Marott Dunalev, simply disappeared. Murders and mysterious disappearances began to happen. The story was completely deviating from the original route of the game. The strangest part of all was Park Si-ho's way of thinking, his cold and calculating personality. From the very beginning, Korin Lok should have doubted him. When he finally realized the truth, it was already too late. Marott Dunalev was one of the heroines of the game, but neither Korin Lok nor Park Si-ho managed to find her because she had disappeared. However, inside a warehouse owned by Park Si-ho, there was Marott Dunalev's staff. Korin Lok began to follow him because he would sneak out at night, but he never imagined that there was an underground warehouse. Inside, there was not just a single weapon. Almost all of Park Si-ho's inventory was stored there. There was also the Odachi, Alicia's supreme weapon, along with many other rare items. There was Jaeger's mace, Lark's spellbook, and equipment belonging to characters who had disappeared as the game progressed. What truly horrified him was finding Marott Dunalev herself, imprisoned inside a capsule. At that moment, Park Si-ho appeared and asked why he was there. Korin Lok questioned what all of that was, reminding him that in the past, Park Si-ho had said he was looking for Marott Dunalev, but had lost track of her. Park Si-ho replied that, either way, she was a demon and that it made no sense to waste the blood of an elder-class vampire. To him, it was simply the efficient use of resources. He also stated that he had drunk a great deal of her blood. At that instant, Korin Lok remembered the elixir he had taken earlier and felt disgust. Park Si-ho asked what the problem was, explaining that he had worked hard to capture her, spending an entire month preparing a trap in the forest. When Korin Lok asked why he had done that, Park Si-ho replied that it was all for the sake of the story. According to him, following the correct route was frustrating because it involved saving people, not eliminating annoying characters like Jaeger or Lark, and having to raise friendship levels in order to manipulate them. Using them in that way was much easier. He claimed that he was better at that game than Korin Lok would ever be. That was when Korin Lok realized that Park Si-ho had been lying the whole time. He had never been a novice. When asked how many people he had already killed, Park Si-ho answered that with 3 more deaths, he would reach 100,000. At that moment, Korin Lok called him a monster. Park Si-ho coldly replied that everyone there was an NPC and that Korin Lok himself had also killed many. Korin Lok answered that he had only killed evil beings beyond salvation, those who were trying to destroy the world. To him, that obsession with efficiency was absurd. If Park Si-ho was a mage, why use the Odachi? If common elixirs were sold world in shops. Why did he need something like that? In the end, Corin Locke concluded that Park Si-hoo simply needed a punching bag to satisfy his psychopathic tendencies. At that moment, Park Si-hoo finally struck back. He grabbed Corin Locke and slammed his head against the glass of the capsule where the vampire was imprisoned. To Park Si-hoo, after everything he had done for him, Corin Locke should not act that way. That world was meant to belong only to the two of them. Corin Locke did not understand his own place and insisted on interfering in matters that did not concern him. All he did was stare at women, something Park Si-hoo no longer intended to tolerate. Dazed, Corin Locke wondered what he was hearing. They had walked together through 199 chapters of that story, and suddenly Park Si-hoo was acting in a completely distorted way. He began to realize that Park Si-hoo had removed everything from their path so that the two of them could remain together. That was when Corin Locke understood why the group had always been made up only of men. To Park Si-hoo, the others were nothing more than disposable things, existing only to be observed. The only one he claimed to truly love was Corin Locke. Faced with that, Corin Locke reacted on instinct, throwing a punch at Park Si-hoo's face and trying to escape. The escape did not last long. Shadowy tentacles emerged and captured him immediately, binding his body completely, without any chance of resistance. Park Si-hoo decided that he would imprison him forever. To him, in that false world, Corin Locke was the only real thing that existed. After that, Corin Locke was sealed inside Park Si-hoo's inventory. Before leaving, Park Si-hoo promised that he would return. As soon as he finished that game, they would stay together forever. Trapped inside the inventory, Corin Locke realized that the final stage had been initiated by Park Si-hoo. He already expected Park Si-hoo to win. From the beginning, he had always killed everything on his own. He was absurdly strong and powerful. Even so, Corin Locke wondered what would happen afterward. Then the system announced that the player had died, the challenge had failed, and the game had been terminated. Corin Locke was shocked to realize that Park Si-hoo had lost. In the next instant, he woke up again at the exact same moment he had arrived in that world. He had regressed 3 years in time, precisely to the day when everything began. This time, however, his objective was clear. He needed to kill a player. He needed to kill Park Si-hoo. There was an event that Corin Locke had never been able to forget, the incident of the Rotion River flood. During a conquest mission against aquatic monsters, a dam collapsed and swept an entire village off the map. Thousands of monsters and people drowned. Faced with that horrific scene, Park Si-hoo simply laughed. At the time, Corin Locke did not understand the reason for that. Only later did he realize that while people were dying, Park Si-hoo saw nothing but an opportunity to monopolize experience. He concluded that that demon had been responsible for nearly 100,000 deaths. This time, however, he would not allow it to happen. At the moment of regression, Park Si-hoo was still only rank 5, the same level as Corin Locke. All player strengthening factors were concentrated at the Merkaba Academy. After entering it, Park Si-hoo would become much stronger. He was not yet a monster, but he would certainly become one in a short time. The Academy entrance ceremony would take place in 5 days. Corin Locke had no time to waste. He began by collecting basic ingredients, especially mushrooms, knowing that this was the only chance he would have to kill Park Si-hoo before it was too late. Meanwhile, during the tutorial mission, a carriage on its way to the Academy broke down in the middle of a forest infested with monsters. The players had to join forces with the guards and protect them until the repairs were completed. Park Si-hoo was there, pretending to be kind and helpful. The carriage was repaired without any problems, and everything seemed resolved. That was when a large creature appeared, interrupting the journey. A werewolf, a rank 2 monster. Corin Locke arrived a little late, as he also did not have much time to prepare. The werewolf easily defeated the knight Laura, leaving her mortally wounded. The other knight decided to buy time, allowing the maiden to be taken far away from there. Even so, Park Si-hoo did not move. He ordered the coachman to leave while he remained behind. When he turned his attention back to the fight, the werewolf had already defeated the knight. Watching from a distance, Corin Locke decided that he needed to confirm something before intervening. He needed to know whether Park Si-hoo would be the hero who saved that world, or just another possessor like himself. At that moment, Park Si-hoo smiled at the werewolf, showing excitement about the fight. That was when the girl from the carriage appeared and attacked the monster with her sword. The werewolf blocked the blow with ease, and Park Si-hoo was visibly annoyed by her appearance. She was Alicia Arden, the second daughter of the Arden family, bearer of the Odachi, one of the 6 swords of the king. She was a named character and extremely important to the story. In the tutorial, there was a hidden event if Alicia Arden died. Park Si-hoo tried to exploit this possibility and attacked her with a knife. At that moment, Corin Locke had his confirmation. Park Si-hoo truly was a possessor. Even so, Alicia Arden did not fall immediately. She was poisoned by Park Si-hoo, who pretended to be remorseful by saying that his hand had slipped. The werewolf took advantage of the opening and struck the Odachi repeatedly. Corin Locke knew exactly what that meant. If Alicia Arden died during that mission, Park Si-hoo would get his hands on the Odachi. After that, he would be able to approach the group of Lunia Arden, a great swordsman, accelerating his rise even further. Park Si-hoo was genuinely impressed. Alicia Arden, even while poisoned, was still able to exchange direct blows with the werewolf. She stood her ground, controlling her posture and focusing entirely on the fight. Using her perfect step technique, she closed the distance and attacked the monster with precise and aggressive sword strikes. Watching that, Park Si-hoo realized that at that pace, Alicia Arden might end up defeating the werewolf on her own. He decided that he would not allow that to happen. Without hesitation, he threw another poisoned knife in her direction. Alicia Arden managed to block it, but at that moment she realized that the attack had been deliberate, calculated to put her at a disadvantage. The distraction was almost fatal, and the werewolf struck her head-on. Even wounded, she managed to counterattack, and the impact of the clash knocked both her and the creature to the ground. Alicia Arden was left gravely injured, unable to continue fighting. Park Si-hoo showed no hesitation at all. To him, that only meant that he could finally get his hands on the odachi. Although that equipment required a special skill to be used properly, he decided to leave that detail for later. His immediate priority was to eliminate the NPCs, since they granted a much greater amount of experience. He advanced toward Alicia Arden, who was completely defenseless. Before he could act, a bag struck his head with force. The bag burst open, spreading a large amount of pollen into the air. Park Si-hoo did not immediately understand what had happened, but soon noticed the problem when several monstrous rabbits appeared, running toward him. Korin-lok knew exactly what he was doing. Magical mushrooms were an extremely valued delicacy among the forest monsters. When covered with that specific type of powder, they became irresistible, functioning like true seasoning in the eyes of the creatures. Because of that, the monsters charged en masse toward Park Si-hoo, forcing him to retreat. Meanwhile, Korin-lok took advantage of the opening to save Alicia Arden. In the process, he also tore out one of the defeated werewolf's fangs, keeping it as an improvised weapon. However, his movements did not go unnoticed. Park Si-hoo noticed the interference and tried to identify who had entered the fight. Korin-lok advanced without hesitation, showing skill as he eliminated 3-horned rabbits in less than a minute, which drew even more attention. When he faced Park Si-hoo, he realized something critical. Park Si-hoo had completely lost his memories of him. Even so, Korin-lok did not waste time. He mentally warned that the way Park Si-hoo was holding his sword could result in his own hand being cut, using this only as a distraction. Then he threw sand directly into his eyes. Park Si-hoo reacted with a quick, though clumsy attack, but failed to hit Korin-lok. Realizing he had no other choice, Korin-lok charged forward with everything he had to defeat him right there. The next strike looked like a knife attack, but Park Si-hoo barely managed to dodge. In fact, that weapon was not an ordinary knife, but the werewolf fang Korin-lok had torn out moments earlier. The attacks nearly hit Park Si-hoo several times. When he began to focus excessively on the weapon rather than on his actual enemy, Korin-lok revealed his true blade. He drove the knife into Park Si-hoo's shoulder, and with the werewolf fang, nearly pierced his face. Park Si-hoo managed to block the attack with the palm of his hand, letting the fang pierce straight through it. Even so, Korin-lok did not retreat. He forced the strike until it pierced Park Si-hoo's neck, finishing him on the spot. For a moment, Korin-lok acknowledged that, thanks to his past life at Park Si-hoo's side, he had become much stronger. Even so, he felt no regret. This was necessary. He had cut the true evil off at the root. The system detected the player's death. It then calculated the probabilities of completing the main scenario and determined that the best available substitute was Korin-lok. His potential, ideology, compatibility, and record were analyzed, and all of the hero's attributes were transferred to him. From that moment on, Korin-lok became the new player. Not exactly a complete player, but a successor to the Martial Master, marked with the sub-player tag. He even wondered if he would finally gain access to a status window, but that was not his greatest concern at that moment. Alicia Arden was dying. She was still breathing, but extremely weak, on the brink of death. One of the werewolf's fangs was embedded in her abdomen, and Korin-lok immediately recognized the poison affecting her. He knew that, at that point in the game, that type of poison was extremely difficult to produce without access to a combination window. If the combination level had been higher, Alicia Arden would have died instantly. That was a relief, but Korin-lok knew there was no time to lose. The situation was still extremely critical. The first thing he did was remove his own belt and tie it tightly around her shoulder to stop the bleeding. He had experience containing hemorrhages and detoxifying wounds, something he had learned out of necessity throughout his past life. Even so, he noticed another immediate risk. If Alicia Arden bit her own tongue because of the pain, the situation would become even worse. Without hesitation, Korin-lok used her own arm as support and placed it in her mouth so she could bite down hard without hurting herself. Then he removed part of his own clothing to gain more freedom of movement. At that moment, he understood why Park Si-hoo had seen him as something special, but he pushed that thought aside. This was going to hurt a lot, and she would need to endure it. With a firm and decisive movement, Korin-lok tore out the werewolf fang embedded in her abdomen. As he did so, he briefly reflected on everything that had happened. He had regressed through time, killed a player, and saved a person. That alone was enough to give meaning to this new life. Later, he prepared the antidote over an improvised campfire. Alicia Arden was conscious, but extremely weak. She tried at least to learn the name of the one who had saved her. Corin Locke avoided answering, asking only that she rest. She would wake up when the antidote was ready. He made that decision because he knew that, from that point on, keeping people in the dark about his actions would be the safest option. While waiting, Corin Locke organized his thoughts. Heroic Legend of Arhan, as the name suggested, was the story of a hero. By resolving the incidents at the academy, the player became the one who would save the world by defeating countless villains and, in the end, the final boss. The only reason Park Sihu followed that story was because the world would be destroyed if the final boss was not defeated. Now that the player was dead, someone needed to take on that role. Corin Locke realized that this someone would have to be him, a sub-player, created only to carry the burden. Even so, he had no access to the system, the status window, the inventory, or combination. He was the backup of something he had never been allowed to use. In the end, everything came down to the same thing. He would have to fulfill the role of hero using only the memories of the future acquired in his past life. For 3 years, he had trained to the limit, but at that moment, he was still nothing more than an ordinary possessor, almost a background character. That was when he turned to what he truly mastered: runes. In his past life, the only magic Corin Locke managed to learn was runes, ancestral letters that contained magical power within themselves. They represented duty, restraint, and oath, known as the runes of the Three Commandments. They were some of the most powerful laws of that world, a source of superhuman strength, and, at the same time, a cause of destruction. Without hesitation, Corin Locke began to inscribe the 3 runes directly onto his own body, as if he were being branded with red-hot iron. The first rune was carved into his left arm, duty. This commandment granted extra power by invoking the honor of a promise. Simple duties granted little return, but he would not make trivial promises. His first promise was clear. He would not close his eyes to the suffering of good people. Whenever he fulfilled this duty, his attributes would increase. If he failed, he would suffer a severe penalty. The second rune was carved into his right arm, restraint. From that moment on, Corin Locke lost the ability to perceive spirits. In that world, everything emanated spiritual perception, including astral beings such as ghosts and formless spirits. Since these beings could only interfere after mutual recognition, they would not be able to affect someone without spiritual perception. Disobedience to this commandment would result in a massive increase in damage received, but in exchange, he gained a large increase in hit rate against material beings. That restraint, in practice, became a shield. Finally, he carved the rune of the oath into his chest. This was the most dangerous commandment of all. Neither he nor Park Sihu had dared to use it in their past lives. Even so, Park Sihu, despite using everything the system offered, had failed. Therefore, Corin Locke decided not to worry about the consequences. He made the heaviest oath possible. He promised to save that world, the greatest ambition, the greatest risk. If he failed, he would die. With that, the 3 commandments were completed. Sometime later, Alicia Arden awakened in the infirmary of Merkaba Academy. Confused, she tried to find out where the person who had brought her there was. The nurse explained that her guardian had left shortly before. Alicia Arden accepted the answer, but when she looked for her belongings, she noticed something important. Her savior's bag was still there. Corin Locke's belt was still stained with blood. Upon noticing this, Alicia Arden asked the nurse if there was any place there that sold honey chocolates. The nurse explained that, for now, she could only consume soup as she was still recovering. 3 days after the end of the tutorial, the day of the entrance ceremony at Merkaba Academy finally arrived. Corin Locke was gathering everything he needed for admission when he noticed something strange inside his wallet. There was a letter there. It was a letter from his mother. In the letter, she said that she was very proud of him. She said that he had become a wonderful man, someone who would protect many people in the future. Corin Locke remained silent for a few moments, wondering exactly when she had placed that letter there. The NPC Corin Locke was originally just an ordinary and incompetent child. Even so, he had a family. When Corin Locke took over that body, his behavior changed and became strange and unfamiliar, but even then, his family never treated him differently. That was how he began to love them. He began to love that family of that world. That was the fundamental difference between him and Park Sihu. Upon arriving at the gondola station that led to the academy, a woman welcomed the new students. She asked if Corin Locke was also a student and commented that he was very tall, someone who looked well fed. Shortly afterward, he ended up boarding the same gondola as her. During the ride, the woman began explaining various things about the academy, acting almost like a guide. That woman was Marott Dunalef, a first-class second-year student, a mage of Merkaba Academy, blessed by all and walking along a wide and promising path. As time passed, however, that world would be marked by tragedies and misfortune. There were depths of despair waiting for Marott Dunalef in the future. In fact, she was the final boss of the first act of that story. Before saying goodbye, Marott Dunalef handed out sweet potatoes to the new students and wished everyone good luck. The players were led to the Great Hall of Merkaba Academy. That was when the magic of spatial expansion began to activate. In an instant, everyone was shocked as space distorted, and they were thrown into an apparently endless abyss. Unlike the others, Corinlock maintained a calm expression. He already knew exactly what was going to happen. The one conducting that process was the old man Haman. The inhabitants of that world had a long history of battles against the tribe of evil, and the most effective weapons against them were superhumans capable of using aura and mana. The place responsible for training these superhumans was precisely the Guardian Academy Merkaba. The first to introduce himself was Professor Fermac Damon, responsible for that year's welcoming ceremony. Upon seeing him, Corinlock felt a strange sense of nostalgia. He truly remembered that man. Fermac Damon explained that everyone there had come to become knights or mages. As soon as they entered the academy, a certificate would be issued. However, he made it clear that acting as if they were already incredible was irritating, since most of them were still nothing more than complete incompetence. The academy wanted to see each person's ability in practice. When Corinlock analyzed his own record, he realized how bad it was. His aura ranking was low, his mana ranking was extremely low, his skills were non-existent, and his overall rank was 6. In practice, he possessed the same level as an ordinary person. Fermac Damon explained that this was the overall ranking and ordered everyone to position themselves on the platform corresponding to their level. Naturally, Corinlock was the first to take his place in the 6th rank line. The professor wished him good luck in the battle that would follow. Soon after, everyone was transported. Meanwhile, the female professors observed the entire evaluation closely. One of them commented that there was no need to evaluate the 1st and 2nd rank students, since it was enough to wait until the evaluation of the others was concluded. In the 2nd rank were the granddaughter of the sword genius Alicia Arden, the druid of Avalon Uel, the sword mercenary Dronwarski, and the golem sorcerer Kranel Luden. In the 1st rank, there was only the celestial yaksha Huaren. The professor admitted that she had not even expected him to apply for that test. Another staff member questioned whether that would not be a good reason to also test the 6th rank students, stating that even the 5th rank students did not seem promising, and that it might be better to eliminate the incompetence right away. The professor replied that the director had been clear in saying that all students should walk the path of learning. With that, the staff member agreed and authorized the start of the test. What fell in front of Corinlock was a box filled with weapons. It was explained that in 30 seconds, a swarm of monsters would be released, and that the students should deal with as many of them as possible. Corinlock immediately understood that this was a typical test, in which a person is placed in an environment without resources and forced to fight monsters according to their level. He found the method unpleasant, as always. Most of the students were rank 5 or 6, and probably would not have time to think, grabbing whatever weapon was available, almost always a sword. That was exactly what he had done in his past life. When the first small wolves appeared, rank 5 monsters, Corinlock reflected that swords were popular, but that it took 100 days to master a spear, 1,000 days for a blade, and 10,000 days for a sword. His choice was immediate. He threw a spear at the first wolf he saw, destroying it instantly. Then he reinvoked the spear and did the same to the other 2. He might not have been very strong physically, but he had enough experience to deal with those creatures. After eliminating a few more wolves, Corinlock realized that 12 seconds had passed. For him, that was still far too much time. In his past life, he had not managed to kill even those small dogs, and had been eliminated right at the beginning. Now, however, he decided that he would kill them all until the next test. However, when he reached the 5-minute mark, no new monsters appeared. He began to wonder if something was wrong with the system. Meanwhile, one of the professors was analyzing the students and commented that those rank 5 students were pathetic. He said that in his time, he could kill a rank 5 monster in 1 minute and 20 seconds. That was when he noticed that Corinlock was standing still, apparently resting. Thinking that an error had occurred, the professor ordered more monsters to be summoned. As soon as they appeared, Corinlock killed them again without difficulty. Confused, the professor turned around and questioned why Corinlock was once again standing still, suspecting a failure in the test. Another staff member replied that this was impossible, since in 20 years Madame Josephine's test had never failed. Even so, the professor insisted that someone who should have been eliminated long ago could not be in that situation, concluding that the monsters simply were not being summoned. Without further discussion, he decided to personally summon 3 more wolves. Already visibly irritated, Corinlock defeated the 3 in just 7.3 seconds, using 1 spear for each. That left the professors completely shocked. The same professor then called Fermac Damon and asked what the average speed of rank 3 and 4 students was. Fermac Damon replied that he did not know for sure, but mentioned that a boy named Yeager had achieved a good result in about 3 minutes. The professor commented that this should not be anything special and decided to advance the test. This time, a boar was summoned, a rank 4 monster, which Corinlock defeated in just 3.7 seconds. Next, an owlbear appeared, a rank 3 monster, considerably more resistant. Corinlock's spear strikes could barely pierce the creature's hide. Faced with that, he activated the Kenna's rune, the flaming rune, which set the monster's fur on fire. Everyone was shocked to see the use of a magical rune. Even realizing that the fire was not very effective at causing direct damage, Corenlock noticed that it was enough to block the owlbear's vision. Taking advantage of the opening, he drove the spear straight into the creature's head, defeating it. One of the professors concluded that that boy was definitely not just a rank 6. The atmosphere became charged with excitement, as everyone wanted to see how far Corenlock could go. The next test would be against a rank 5 evil spirit. As soon as the test began, Corenlock realized that something had been summoned, but he could not see or hear anything. He understood that this was due to the penalty of the test, since he did not possess the ability to interact with spirits. Unable to see evil spirits, he decided to wait exactly 1 minute. For him, that was sufficient confirmation that the test had been activated. After that realization, Corenlock simply looked up and gave up on the test. He was disqualified in the evil spirit trial, but in the monster test, he had broken 3 records. Even so, one of the professors could not understand the reason for the withdrawal and wondered what exactly was strange about that boy. Later, while the evaluators analyzed the final rankings amid all the commotion, Corenlock noticed the presence of Jaeger Hinchpeter. He remembered that in his past life, Jaeger had started a fight with Park Si-hoo at the beginning of the story, which ended with Park Si-hoo killing him in a fit of rage. Corenlock thought that although Jaeger was an arrogant delinquent, that kind of behavior was common for someone his age and did not justify killing him. Even so, Jaeger Hinchpeter continued to provoke lower-ranked students, mocking them and saying they were useless. There were people who even lost to weak wolves, and one of those who felt deeply cornered by that was Lark. Coren knew that in his past life, Lark had never managed to overcome his own inferiority complex. While being humiliated, Lark ended up meeting the same fate as Jaeger and died. That was when the director himself, Kassar, appeared. He explained that everyone had entered the academy to become stronger. Some already possessed enough talent, while others still had a long road ahead. Although he could not guarantee that everyone would achieve what they desired by the end of their time at the academy, he hoped that at least they would be able to find their own paths. The academy existed only to help them take the first step correctly. The second step was already the responsibility of each individual. After that, he ended the speech and wished everyone a good day. When everyone dispersed, Jaeger went back to provoking Lark, intimidating him by asking his rank and making demeaning comments. At that moment, Coren approached Jaeger in a friendly manner and complimented his tattoo, saying that it looked very stylish. He commented that the tattooed letter must represent his blood type to make a transfusion easier if he ever got injured. Jaeger confirmed it and said that Coren really understood these things. He explained that the tattoo had been done by his mother, who was a tattoo artist. Originally, she only worked with line work, but since he was the one who asked, she ended up doing it in the old school style. Coren found that incredible. Jaeger then showed that he had several other tattoos and commented that Coren seemed to already know that whole story. In his past life, when Jaeger disappeared, his mother went to the academy and explained that those tattoos were not just aesthetic, but a form of care. It was simply the huge heart of a mother worried about her son. Jaeger showed his other tattoos while Coren introduced himself in a friendly way, asked Lark his name, and began talking with them. That attitude put an end to the bullying. Alicia witnessed everything. To her, Coren had saved a fellow student from bullying. He seemed like an incredible and genuinely good person. However, Coren thought that his action had only served to create a good first impression on Lark, because in truth, he saw him as a free skill book. Most of the facilities at Merkaba Academy were provided for free. The cafeterias were cheaper than food outside the academy, and the dormitories also had no cost. Among all the facilities, the most recommended were the training rooms. In them, it was possible to perform training that would previously have been impossible, such as fighting invisible spiritual bodies. Coren displayed exceptional skill with the spear. Many people stopped to watch him, impressed. They commented that students normally only faced spirits in the second semester, yet he was already doing it now. Even Marietti showed some interest while observing, but after some time, Coren ended up taking a direct blow to the face, realizing that perhaps this was still too much for him. That was when one of the instructors approached. He realized that Coren was a freshman and asked why he was training against a spiritual body. Coren explained that he wanted to improve his spear skills, but internally wondered why that old man had appeared out of nowhere. He feared that something might have gone wrong during the exam. The instructor explained that, in fact, Coren possessed a great spirit. As a gift, he gave him 10 meal tickets and said that Coren could look for him again if he managed to improve even further. Coren did not expect that, but he thought it was good to receive recognition and support from an instructor. After that, he returned to training. He resumed practice, attacking the flying wind spirit quickly. Once again, however, he was hit squarely in the abdomen and fell to the ground. This time it was Mariette who helped him. She approached, asked if it was difficult, and offered him water in a cup. She suggested that he rest a bit, saying that with time, he would get the hang of it. Coren, however, thought that there would be no next time. The next time had already happened 3 years ago. Back then, Then, he had Sihu by his side, with status windows, potions, skill books, and combination systems. Now he was completely alone, especially because he himself had killed Sihu. Even so, Korin thanked Marietta for the help and resumed his training. He needed to become the best. First, he had to discover his own limits, and then surpass them. He began using various techniques he had learned in his past life, such as the Dark Serpent Thrust, the Tiger Wind Strike, the Blocking Counterattack, the Returning Heaven Spin, and the Mountain Throw. Before, he had not possessed a strong body, nor great magical power or aura. The information about Park Sihu as a player had been extremely useful. To face monsters and geniuses, he had needed to work harder than anyone else, and the years of effort would never betray him. He used the Dark Serpent Thrust again, which pierced part of the spirit, but did not hit it completely. Mariette noticed that he had simply thrown the spear. When it seemed that he had given up, she was surprised to see Korin recover the weapon in mid-air. He used the Creeping Serpent Strike and hit the spirit directly, causing a large magical explosion inside the training room. Words like strong or exceptional sounded far too cliché to describe him. Only sincere admiration passed through Mariette's mind. She was extremely impressed, thinking Korin was incredible. However, from the impact of the explosion, he was thrown upward and fell with full force onto the floor of the training room. Korin realized that he had pushed past his physical limits, at least with his current body. The next morning, Mariette was showing the school facilities to the freshman students. Korin was still badly injured and completely bandaged because of the previous training. As he observed his own condition, he concluded that to fight properly, strengthening his body was the most urgent issue. To increase his physical capabilities without relying on Sihu's elixirs, there was only one path: the commandments. He then remembered one of them, which said not to close his eyes to the misfortune of others. Following that thought, Korin approached the solitary Lark, interested in talking about grimoires. A grimoire was basically a skill book, a powerful artifact that allowed one to acquire a specific magic or trait simply through reading. The library of Merkaba Academy was comparable in size to the academy itself, accumulating and transmitting the knowledge of humanity for generations. Even so, Korin thought that all that grandeur was just a facade. To him, the true purpose of that place was to hide grimoires. Lark began to help him locate those grimoires, reminding him that he needed to keep his promise. Korin agreed, stating that as long as the conditions were met, he would gain access to the grimoire with the registered traits. He knew that Lark was extremely hardworking, an intellectual and exemplary student, someone who memorized countless types of magic and stored them in his spellbooks. Even so, Korin understood that regardless of how many spells were memorized, it would be difficult to use them all if the mage's mana level and capacity were low. With a grimoire, however, the situation was completely different. While Korin threw several books onto the floor, Lark asked him to stop fooling around. In reality, that was part of a mechanism that activated a secret passage. Lark questioned how Korin knew about the existence of that place, but Korin simply continued forward through the hidden corridor. When they stopped halfway, Korin decided that it was time to fulfill the promise. They shook hands. Lark believed that he would help repel evil spirits, but suddenly Korin struck him hard, knocking him unconscious. That marked the true beginning of the plan. Korin initially intended to help Lark, but he also needed to complete a mission. If he managed to capture the evil spirits in that place, he could obtain the secret piece he desired most. The problem was the presence of a special evil spirit, Duke Sabancia. That mission had been created to be impossible to complete. The challenge was to capture a special evil spirit instead of a common one, even though Korin could not even see it. In addition, the spirit attacked directly, using the power of an ancient Duke general who had commanded a great army 800 years ago. Most players would die the instant the mission began, but Korin possessed a special restriction that made him immune to the spirit's direct influence. Even so, he still could not see it. Therefore, Korin went to Duke Sabancia, explaining that he could not see him and asking him to enter Lark's body. In that world, there were what were called factors, elements capable of transforming ordinary humans into creatures such as vampires or werewolves. Duke Sabancia had awakened as a vampire in the past and ended up killing his own servant. Despite trying to control his impulses, he failed. Fearing that he might kill his wife and daughter, he evacuated his family and sealed the castle to prevent a massacre. In the end, he used magic to seal himself inside a book. That book was the grimoire hidden in that library. Duke Sabancia agreed and entered Lark's body. Even so, Korin made it clear that he would not allow him to attack. The second reason for choosing Lark was the fact that he was a human with very little physical capability. Because of that, Korin struck him again and kept him immobilized. Feeling some pity but understanding that this was the best strategy to complete the Duke's mission. Corrin could have killed Lark to obtain the vampire's items directly, just as Park Sihu had done in the past, but he was not that kind of person. Instead, he chose to talk with Duke Sabancia, telling him what had happened to his wife and daughter after the sealing. He explained that the wife died sometime after leaving the castle, and that the daughter became an incredible adventurer, traveling the world. He did not approve of Park Sihu's methods, and because he also had a family he loved in that world, he decided to give that tormented soul a proper end. Duke Sabancia showed deep gratitude and apologized for the initial attack. Corrin accepted, noting that he had not even been hit, but he made one more request. Before the Duke disappeared completely, they had a long conversation. As a reward, Corrin obtained soul dust, and the grimoire granted him the ability called Persistent Warrior Regeneration. As long as he maintained his willpower and fighting spirit, his body would continue to regenerate. Corrin remembered that Sihu possessed this same ability, but he never knew how powerful it truly was, since he had never been seriously injured. When Lark finally woke up, Corrin asked him not to push himself too hard. An evil spirit had possessed his body, and he still needed time to recover. Lark felt his jaw aching and commented on the discomfort after being possessed. Corrin could not answer with certainty, only concluding that it probably did hurt. Then he told Lark to be quiet and handed him a grimoire. The last reason Corrin had chosen Lark was precisely to help him. He wanted to see hardworking people being rewarded. With that, he considered his duty fulfilled and received 80 points. Comparing it to how the game worked, he concluded that each level granted 5 status points, which made that reward equivalent to gaining 16 levels at once. Even so, no level up notification appeared. That meant the reward did not include experience. The system recorded that Corrin Locke had not turned a blind eye to Lark's misfortunes, granting 40 points of equal distribution. In addition, he received another 40 points for not ignoring the misfortunes of Duke Sabancia. Later, in the training room, Marott was handing out sweet potato. She watched Corrin and asked whether he would continue with the same training as before. She showed support and said she would stay there to encourage him. Some people commented that she should not raise false expectations, as they believed he would not be able to capture a spiritual body. Even so, Marott bet 2 gold coins that he would succeed. Corrin realized that they had started using him as the basis for bets. Instead of getting irritated, he decided to simply focus. All the status he had gained after helping Sabancia ascend would be extremely useful. Because of that, he decided to test the basics. His thrusts were much faster and more powerful. This time, with a single strike, he defeated the wind spirit, using the serpent omen. Corrin realized that he had become far too strong in a short time. Marott noticed the difference, remembering that the previous day he had needed several blows, while now he resolved everything with just one. She had probably watched everything the day before. More important than that, Corrin realized that Marott was a mage capable of tracking, with her eyes alone, the intent of the serpent calamity. In the end, she handed him the portion of gold he had won in the bet. Thanks to him, Marott made a good profit. Corrin liked that as well, since few people in the world dislike money. To him, Marott was proving herself more intelligent with each passing moment. Later, Corrin reflected on his past life, remembering that he had fought tooth and nail to improve his martial arts. Up to that point, he had barely managed to reach the 5th of the 6 steps toward enlightenment. There was still a long road ahead, but his progress with the spear was far faster than he had imagined. The real problem was the magical rune Hagalars. He could not use it because he had very little mana. This had also been an obstacle in his past life, since magical runes consumed absurd amounts of mana. If he could solve that, he would certainly become much stronger than before. While thinking about this during the night, someone called out to him in the silent and dark corridors of the academy. Regardless of how rudimentary his understanding of runic magic was, there was someone in that academy he could not defeat. She was the only female character he had never been able to kill, the celestial Yaksha, Waran. Corrin found her presence there strange and wondered why she was talking to him. He thought about ignoring her and leaving, since he saw her as a true ticking time bomb. However, Waran showed that she knew more than she should, hinting that he had been merged and questioning whether he truly believed he was the owner of that body. That made Corrin wonder if she knew that he was a possessor. He understood that existences like Waran, living beings with both a human and a monstrous soul in the same body, were naturally contradictory. They said that those who stood between life and death could see the color of the soul. To her, it must have been strange not to be able to perceive that in him. Waran showed curiosity about the feeling of crushing and consuming the original soul of a body. Corrin, in turn, concluded that he had already worried too much about that in his past life. He reflected on whether he and Corrin Locke were truly different people. The memories of the original Corrin had assimilated into his own, and because of that, were also part of who he was now. He thought about who had lived the childhood, studied, followed a military career, and built an entire life before. All of that seemed confusing and meaningless. Still, he realized that for someone like Waran, Hwaran, the situation was different because the original still remained inside that body. Hwaran stated that the true owner of that body was not Korin and that he was merely a thief without that right. Korin, however, reflected on a story from a region near his homeland, where there was someone who turned into a green giant whenever he became angry, called Bruce Benner. The curious part of that case was that the two personalities opposed and hated each other, yet still coexisted. It worked precisely because each was good at different things. What Korin wanted to say was that regardless of whether the original soul had been newly formed or not, both possessed distinct characteristics and coexisted. Like it or not, they were born within the same body, and there was no sin in simply being born. Warren, however, believed that for some existences, being born was indeed a sin. 3 years ago, Korin could still understand the agony of that child. Now, however, he simply ignored that kind of thought. The next day, Korin headed to the south side of the academy. He left the dormitory before the birds even began to sing, announcing the start of the weekend. Motivated by the mission board, small and large missions serve to level up and prepare students for the next main mission, becoming a necessary path for progress. However, that was not his main objective at that moment. He just wanted to test something. That was when he noticed Alicia walking right beside him. Korin thought that he did not have much information about her. In his past life, Sihu had completely ruined her fate, and the memories he had did not match what he was seeing now in the game. Korin realized that Alicia had been doing missions since the first week. Based on her rank, there should have been no need for that, but she explained that she needed money. The academy did not offer a support fund because her family income was among the 10 highest. Korin found that similar to the scholarship system in Korea, where students from wealthy families received no aid. In addition, Alicia's parents were permissive and gave her no money at all, which put her in a difficult situation. Korin then suggested a patrol mission, since the cost-benefit was good. Alicia commented that the mission accepted up to 3 people and asked if he would like to go along. Korin refused, explaining that he had another mission in mind. For him, that weekend would serve to separate the wheat from the chaff. He chose a simple mission, to find a 2-year-old butterfly cat. The experience and payment were low, but that did not matter. The true objective was to fulfill a commandment. By saving and returning the butterfly cat, which had nearly died at the hands of aquatic monsters, he managed to prevent the owner's misfortune. As a result, he returned the animal and received 5 equally distributed points. That confirmed that the commandments really worked even in small missions. After that, Korin continued carrying out missions to accumulate more points, almost forgetting about a mission even more important than scoring. Meanwhile, in a restaurant, a man was extremely irritated. He had prepared a sauce with more than 10 ingredients, including garlic, carrot, and pepper, but nothing seemed to satisfy his desire to make a truly delicious chicken. That was when Korin appeared and suggested adding starch syrup. Then he left. The restaurant owner found it strange, but decided to test it. To his surprise, the sauce became exceptionally tasty. As he left the restaurant, Korin thought that this was exactly the mission he needed to resolve, since for the Koreans of that world, surviving without delicious chicken would be unthinkable. He received another 5 equally distributed points. Korin did not imagine that the commandments would apply even to situations like that, which made him extremely excited. Meanwhile, Hwaran watched that strange individual from a distance. A teacher approached and said that she would need permission to leave the academy, but Hwaran simply turned away, remembering what Korin had said. There was no sin in being born. Even so, the words of other people echoed in her mind, claiming that she should never have been born. Later, in the hunting field, the teacher announced that the first-year students would be evaluated through their survival tactics. Those who managed to reach the cabin to the north, at the end of the forest, would pass. Everyone put on their rank armbands. Depending on the time it took them to arrive while using the armbands, they would receive fewer points. These points could be exchanged for prizes. Korin noticed that Hwaran was not there. That did not surprise him, since she did not usually participate in that kind of practical activity. When Alicia approached, Korin asked whether she had managed to complete any mission. She confirmed and explained that, thanks to his help, she had finally gathered enough funds for her expenses. Korin then offered a sweet he had brought, warning that it was extremely sweet. Alicia realized it was a honey bomb, something she loved. That moment, Josephine used her magical whip to begin the field test. Korin thought that he had already seen every kind of mage, but creating a special magic capable of encompassing so many people at the same time was something only Josephine, the Great Witch, could do. Korin was thrown into the middle of the forest and soon noticed 2 students fighting each other. The hunting field was an important event in which even professionals needed several attempts to achieve good results. It was a total battle system where each participant started in a random location and needed to accumulate points by stealing the armbands of others. Korin could even get involved in the nearby fights, but decided not to waste time there. For him, the most dangerous person at that moment was Alicia, a high-ranked knight with a blue armband. Since Hwaran was not present, he believed that dealing only with Alicia would be manageable. She did not know it, but Corin had placed a tracking rune on the sweet she ate. This rune would allow him to find her again. Meanwhile, Josephine informed the director that she would also go into the forest. Even though several professors were already spread throughout the area, she believed that extra caution was necessary. She questioned the absence of a certain child, and the director replied that he had not sent her. She had gone on her own. In fact, Warren was pursuing Corin, although he had not yet realized it. The director commented that she had undergone a change in her heart. At the same time, Alicia was already facing trouble. Several students had joined together to attack her at once. She considered that unfair, but the others claimed that what was unfair were the abilities she possessed. Even so, Alicia managed to take all of them down. When another student charged at her using only his fists, he was struck by a stone thrown by Corin, who was irritated. Alicia thought that he had come to save her, but soon realized that Corin was also going against her. Alicia felt betrayed because she had trusted him and believed he was a good person. She was a second-rank knight, specialized in direct combat, but she still could not fully use the Vigilant Eyes abilities. Corin judged that, even so, she was still an excellent fighter and suggested that she hand over the armband. Although she could not be compared to her prodigy sister, Alicia was still among the top 1%. She had easily defeated 7 students who formed an alliance composed of 3rd and 4th ranks. Because of that, she was not worried about Corin, believing that he was still only rank C. However, when she blocked his spear, she realized that he was extremely strong. Corin knew her strategy well, based on a short-range sword and rapid approach. He would never allow the distance to be closed. Alicia noticed some openings and tried to take advantage of them, but Corin judged that this came from a lack of practice caused by excessive reliance on talent. He used the counterblock attack, seized her sword, and applied his techniques. He used spear determination, maximum essence, and the 6 steps of victory. Alicia was struck directly in the abdomen, thrown far away, and lost her sword. She concluded that Corin was not necessarily stronger or faster, but possessed overwhelming experience. She began to wonder whether he truly was only rank C. She had been completely defeated. Corin took her armband and thought that he would make good use of it. At that moment, however, an extremely powerful presence approached, knocking everything around aside. A great sword collided violently with Corin's spear. He immediately recognized the weapon as a heavy iron magic sword. The one who appeared was Dronwarski, who commented that Corin was good for a rank C, but demanded that he hand over the armband. Corin assessed the situation and concluded that he did not want to face him. Even after defeating numerous people, Dronwarski did not show a single injury. With no other option, Corin decided to retreat and flee. However, Dronwarski noticed that the armband Corin was carrying was blue and began throwing several swords in his direction. Alicia also started running, following Corin. He knew that it made no sense to fight there. His only goal was to take the armband to the cabin. The problem was that the cabin was being guarded by one of Cranel Luden's golems, which made it clear that to enter it would be necessary to defeat it. Alicia thought that was unfair. Corin, on the other hand, concluded that it was not unfair, just extremely difficult to deal with. In front of him was Cranel, and behind him was Drone. While trying to avoid a fight, it became clear that he would have to face 2 named students at the same time. With no other choice, he raised his spear with relentless determination. If he could not avoid combat, then he would give his best until the end. Later, someone knocked on the cabin door. It was Corin Locke, the first-place finisher, carrying 3 blue armbands. The person in charge commented that it had been impressive, and Corin replied that he had been lucky. After taking down Cranel, Alicia thought that his performance had truly been remarkable. He pierced through the core of the magic sword before it reached its maximum potential. To prevent Dron from using telekinesis, he drove one of his swords into the ground and guided the others directly toward the golem, using the creature itself against its controller. In this way, Dron was forced to neutralize the golem. Alicia was impressed not only by his reaction speed, but also by his judgment and psychological control. He seemed like a soldier who had fought countless wars. As she recalled his words, she realized that she had not trained enough because she trusted herself too much. Dron was also impressed by that boy, while Cranel, poor thing, remained sprawled on the ground. When Cranel was defeated, Corin explained that golems are large targets for small but powerful opponents, and that in his place he would have sought an ally to protect the rear. Cranel admitted that he had no friends, and Corin simply wished him good luck, leaving him there alone. On that day, 3 named first-year students would remember Corin Locke, each in their own way. Among the remaining participants, the strongest person was the druid Yahello, who received the protection of the forest Duel. However, she was not alone. The true power of that place was the great mage of Merkaba Academy, Mariette Dunelef, who with her water magic completely wiped out the plants that sustained the poor druid. The veterans were taking on the role of monsters, assisting in the students' practical training, and the unlucky Duel ended up being one of the most affected. Thus, the hunting training seemed to have come to an end, or at least that was what everyone thought, because Frieren was also present. Mariette noticed that Frieren had taken down several people and concluded that she must be looking for someone specific, gathering only similar targets. Frieren tried to pass, but Mariette raised an enormous wall of ice, making it clear that by the rules, Frieren was considered a monster and therefore would not receive privileges. Later, Corin chose his reward after accumulating 117 points. He took a boar molar knife, a protective leather coat, and a bear shark bile, the rarest item among them all, and the main reason he had participated. In addition, he chose a mandragora seed. The man in the cabin commented that he had a great eye for choices and was surprised that someone would select a mandragora seed. With 17 points still remaining, Corin exchanged them for a nutritional supply for plants and a pair of ear protectors. After leaving the cabin, Corin judged that it had been an excellent shopping session. Even after playing that game so many times, he had never done so well. It was also the first time he saw Yeager and Lark finish together, with Yeager reaching 19 points and Lark 15. Corin realized that they had worked as a team, and the result confirmed it. Later, Corin went to help Cranel find a golem core, since he needed it create his next construction. In his past life, Corin had worked extensively with Cranel and knew that there were not many tanks capable of drawing monsters and dealing damage as well as golems, especially against semi-giant creatures. Because of that, he helped Cranel locate the core. Alicia finished the training badly injured. Dron had his battle power reduced to 0 after losing the materials needed to create his swords, leaving him in critical condition. Corin was shocked to see her like that, but managed to rescue her in time. At that moment, an extremely strong tremor began to shake the forest. He realized that it must be Mariette's doing and understood that he needed to flee. Corin knew that Mariette Dunelef possessed a natural ability to analyze magic, in addition to an absurd amount of mana. She was a mage who seemed never to have experienced despair, frustration, or failure, a perfect talent. As they said, Mariette Dunelef was a true genius, and to her that hunting field was nothing more than a simple playground. She only needed to manage the difficulty moderately and help the freshmen evolve while acting as a monster. For Mariette Dunelef, it should have been just a game. However, the situation got out of control when she began to be completely dominated by Frieren. She launched several ice fragments, but Frieren shattered them all using her own body, as if it were nothing. Although Mariette had promised the professors not to use magic above the intermediate level, she was already resorting to advanced magic. Even as she wanted to deny it, she was using all of her power. Even so, Frieren broke through the ice and landed a direct kick to her stomach. In that instant, Mariette realized that what stood before her was no longer a game, but a walking natural disaster. Before the situation worsened, Josephine herself appeared and ordered Frieren to stop, asking whether Mariette was all right. She replied that she was, as much as possible, but in the very next second, she lost consciousness and fell. During that training session in the hunting field, several unexpected outcomes occurred. The first place finisher was Corin Locke, a rank 5 student. The second major incident involved the first-year ace, Frieren, and the second-year ace, Mariette, who ended up facing each other, resulting in Mariette being taken to the infirmary. Corin found all of it frightening. He believed that Mariette should have already awakened as a boss after the tremor, but since she seemed stable for the time being, everything was still following the original storyline, at least in theory. There were still about 3 weeks left until the true awakening, so he decided to think about it later. After that, Corin returned to the forest around the hunting field because he wanted to find a being that lived there. He dripped eye drops into his eyes and put on an exaggerated performance, pretending that he had dropped into the lake the precious seed his mother had left him. Shortly after, a presence appeared and asked why he was crying. According to the heroic legend of Aran, there is a special event that can only be used once, involving a Taoist hermit. This event is based on the legend in which the hermit asks a woodcutter who dropped an axe into a lake whether the golden axe or the silver axe belongs to him. Just like in the original legend, 2 items appear, 1 gold and 1 silver, both limited to unique class weapons or lower. Over time, veteran players turned this into a random item challenge, which allowed even heroes to obtain rare items, something clearly added by the producers as a provocation. When the hermit asked whether the golden seed was his, Corin denied it. When he asked about the silver one, he denied it as well. Corin reflected on how insane it would be for someone to throw a mandragora seed bought with great effort for 100 points into a lake. Because of that, the hermit concluded that the common seed must be his. Corin confirmed it, recognizing to himself that the true lunatic in that situation was himself. The hermit praised his honesty and, as a reward, handed over all 3 seeds. Corin thanked him deeply as the hermit departed. After that, Corin laughed quietly because he already knew that this would happen. That location allowed item duplication. The common mandragora seed increased mana, but the gold and silver seeds had special effects. The gold one would generate a mandragora that shone with golden light, while the silver one was a secret piece that could only be obtained through that method. In his last life, Siru had consumed both, but now both belonged to Corin. Later, Corin began to reflect on Marott and on what would lead her to become the first boss to awaken as a special vampire. This was linked to a mission that would occur in 3 weeks, involving an encounter with the vampire assassin of the City of Mist, John D. He still did not know exactly how the agent of the demonic tribe within Marott would awaken, but there was still time to find out. That was also the reason he had shown his power against rank 2 named students. No one in their right mind would fight side by side with a weak rank 5 knight, even if he asked. Because of that, he made sure to draw attention to his own talent. Within a week, the named students would be fully recovered, and then he would propose forming a group. Corin would have to face the first boss of the heroic legend of Aron, the special vampire Marott Dunalef. There were 3 weeks left to prepare. However, that very same dawn, Marott awakened. One of the female students asked how Marott Dunalef was doing and whether her throat had recovered. It was explained that the first outburst had needed to be contained. Corinlock thought that if he had enough preparation and faith, he would be able to save her. He believed that he could still save a girl from her misfortune. Until then, Corin decided that he would train Alicia, hire the sword control mercenary, and convince the druid Yahello to join him. He also intended to get closer to Crenel Luden. Everything seemed perfect. If he prepared properly, it would be like taking candy from a child, as long as no unexpected variables appeared. However, at that exact moment, an unexpected variable was unfolding. Marott was about to bite her own friend's neck, acting like a vampire. The next morning, Josephine commented that she should not have sent Frieren on that mission. If Frieren wanted to learn anything, she would have to receive private lessons. Meanwhile, Frieren stared out the dormitory window, seriously considering whether she should jump over the wall. That was when Corin appeared, hanging from a tree near the window. He asked her to open it, and showed that he had brought a small cake. Frieren remembered that visits were against Academy rules. Corin argued mentally that he was not invading anything, just hanging from a tree, and that Josephine was not even present at that moment. He noticed that Frieren had no visible scars. She had been forbidden to go out and to receive visitors because of what happened in the hunting field. Corin understood Professor Josephine's concern. After all, Frieren was a special demi-human. Even so, Frieren explained that Josephine had not only gone out, but had been gone for more than 4 days. The information shocked Corin so much that he actually fell from the tree. Even so, he quickly recovered thanks to a warrior's persistence, and decided that he would see her later. He ran off because if Josephine had left the most dangerous person in the academy alone, something very serious was happening. The most skilled teachers were on the move. At the same time, Corin had his request for a visit denied. There was a guard in the infirmary, something far too strange to ignore. He tried to justify his presence by saying that Josephine had asked him to bring something to eat and drink. The guard believed him, thinking that she really took good care of those under her responsibility. Even so, the request to visit Marott was denied. Isabel, who was supposed to be under protection, had disappeared, and the mere presence of a guard in the infirmary already raised suspicions. The more Corin thought about it, the more uncomfortable he became. There was a rune hidden in the sandwich. When the guard ate it, he felt immediate nausea and ran to the bathroom. Corin entered the infirmary right after, wondering if this was really happening. Everything was happening almost a month earlier than expected. He hoped that his suspicions were wrong. The person lying in the infirmary was not Marott, but Isabel. When he saw the vampire marks on her neck, Corin had no more doubts. Marott Dunalef had awakened as a vampire boss 3 weeks earlier than planned. To defeat Marott, the final boss of the first act, there were 4 strategic phases. The first dealt with the monster horde. The second involved trapping her with magic circles and dealing continuous damage. The third was facing a crazed enemy of the Blood Realm. After knocking her out, the final phase followed, the core of the attack. Even without the main player, a combination of the named first-year students would normally be enough. However, Alicia was injured because of him. Dron had his weapon broken because of him. Crenel had his golem destroyed because of him. All the named first-year students were out of combat because of his own actions. In the original storyline, after finding the vampire killer of the City of Mist, Marott attacked her roommate and went insane. In his last life, they waited beneath the dormitories to intervene quickly. On that occasion, Park Sihu had deliberately let Marott go in order to capture her later. Now, because of Corin, everything had turned into complete chaos. Alicia had broken bones in several parts of her body. Crenel's golem had been destroyed, making him useless until it could be rebuilt. Corin even thought about Huaren, but he could not predict how the situation would unfold with her. There was no choice left but to rely on Dron. Dron refused at first, reminding him that the rule of mercenaries was not to take part in a fight that could not be won. Without his sword, he only had his own hands. Then Corin offered 20 gold coins, in addition to soul dust with 100% purity. The payment was enough to convince him. Dron accepted, stating that Corin was a reliable employer, and joined the group. Later, Corin went to the library to convince Yahello. He mentioned that he had read about the traditional alphabet and the Ogan alphabet, exactly the knowledge he was trying to decipher. If she helped him, he would teach her everything he knew. The druid Yahello joined his group for that reason. Later in the cafeteria, Corin Locke went to Yeager and Lark, the new inseparable duo, to say that he was looking for people to form a group. He made it clear that it would be a difficult mission, with low pay and extreme danger. There was even a real possibility of death when facing a special demon, but if they succeeded, they would gain honor and fame. The two accepted without hesitation. The group now had a secondary damage dealer, a support, and enough people to endure the first phase of the confrontation. Thus, they concluded that they had met the minimum requirements. It was the best Corin could do at that moment. Then Corin Locke remembered what Sihu had said when he witnessed everything. Park Sihu had commented that Marietti was crying while hiding in the forest, and that it had been very difficult to find her. Corin knew that there was only one forest inside the academy, the hunting field. Dron told his employer that he understood the objective, but asked how they were going to find her. Corin explained that this was exactly why they had brought a druid capable of communicating with spirits. Yahello asked how much he really knew about Marriott, and then struck her staff against the ground, asking the spirits to guide them to her. Several spirits appeared around the group, leaving everyone impressed. However, Corin could not see anything. Everyone started staring at him strangely, which left him confused. He realized too late that there was a creature behind him. With a single movement of his spear, he split the monster in half, but soon after an entire horde appeared. Lark began reciting his spells, while Yeager prepared his hammer. Corin ordered them to retreat a few steps and not run in a disorganized way. The plan was to reduce the number of enemies, little by little. Lark would stay in the rear, protected by the others. Dron advanced alongside Corin, realizing that he showed neither fear nor hesitation. He acted like a true commander, which caused great admiration in Dron. Yeager commented that he thought he had seen Marietti in that area, but could not find her, only monsters everywhere. Yahello explained that this was exactly what the spirits had shown. Doubts arose as to whether Marietti was controlling those creatures. Lark disagreed, stating that monsters did not behave like that in groups. Corin, however, explained that Marriott was not a puppet manipulator and had no way to control so many monsters at the same time, much less in such a disordered manner. After defeating the horde, Dron questioned the reason for that aggressive behavior. Corin explained that monsters attack according to their instincts, but that in extremely abnormal situations, they enter total panic and begin to act without logic, fleeing or attacking indiscriminately. That was when Marietta Dunalev, already transformed, appeared before them. Corin ordered everyone to prepare for battle. Lark was to remain in the rear. Yeager and Dron would step back one pace and act as support. He himself would take the front line. A new mission appeared. The target was Mariette Dunalev. Corin's attributes increased by 50% due to the influence that this battle would have on the world. His commandments were being strengthened. The first of them was to save that world, and to do so, he needed to stop Marietta. However, this conflicted with another commandment, which stated that he would not turn a blind eye to the misfortune of good people. The scenario was updated. The mission changed from defeating Mariette to saving her. They realized that she was crying, although completely out of control. When Dron attacked with his giant sword, the strike was blocked by a barrier of blood. Lark identified it as a familiar born from vampire blood. The fact that a newly awakened vampire was already able to create an orb was terrifying. Korean explained that there was no reason to panic. Mariette had just been born and still did not possess an adequate source of mana or blood. As long as she was not supplied with her mother's blood, she would not be able to do anything other than block attacks. Dron recalled that the greatest weakness of mages was defense, and that was why Mariette had activated that resource immediately. Then Mariette ordered everyone to disappear from there. She used a blood spell, but Yahello managed to defend the group using the power of the forest. Yahello was in the ideal place to fight. The hunting field was her natural habitat. She activated rapid root growth and the protection of the forest spirits. Even so, the blood bullets almost broke the roots. That exchange alone consumed almost half of Yahello's mana, and she had still not fully recovered from the previous test. Corin realized that Yahello was reaching her limit. He then took a knife, made a small cut in the nearby wood, and asked her to hold on, because he intended to turn that fight around in 5 minutes. Yahello doubted whether that was not a lie, but she stayed only because of the promise she had made to him. Meanwhile, Mariette continued accumulating even more blood power. In Phase 1, she made the surrounding monsters attack the group. In Phase 2, she began to fight on her own. For everything to work out, they needed to jump from Phase 2 directly to Phase 4. In other words, until reaching the final phase, Marott was still not using her maximum power. This had happened before, both in the game and in Korin's last life. The walls made of wood and roots began to crack under the pressure of the blood. Korin decided that Lark needed to leave before Duel, since he could only use beginner magic a few times. He ordered Lark to leave immediately, and, when Duel joined him, for both of them to run as far away as possible. Korin realized that the real problem was alchemical magic. Marietti's blood mixed with her ice magic, forming frozen blood crystals that exploded the wall of roots created by Duel. Even so, Duel continued reciting spiritual spells. The spirits answered the call. Korin realized that even though he had carved several runes into those roots, only a pure-blood druid could activate them. Despite the appearance being similar to runic writing, that ancient script was a completely different system. It was a secret script that could only be obtained after completing Duel's scenario, as she had always worked to become a sage of the forest. It was a writing of the devotees of nature, more than 1,000 years old. The runes inscribed through Duel's power allowed her to summon the Wicker Doll, a gigantic willow golem. Duel could hardly believe that it had truly been summoned. Korin thought it was a somewhat dishonest trick, but in that situation there was no other option. He then warned Yeager that there was still an owlbear alive among the earlier monsters and ordered that it be thrown together with the Wicker Doll. Everything was already prepared, and no one had noticed. Yeager hurled the owlbear, which collided with the golem and was pulverized. The monster was burned as a sacrifice, serving as fuel for the Wicker Doll. The golem was not affected by either Marietti's blood attacks or her ice attacks, but with every blow it delivered, Duel felt crushing pressure. Maintaining that summon required absurd power. Korin ordered her to keep controlling the golem, because if she lost control, everyone would die. Heavy and gigantic, the Wicker Doll advanced toward Marott. She counterattacked with blood spears, but the golem remained standing, blocking everything with ease. The problem arose when it was pierced by a colossal spear. The fire that kept it active was extinguished, and the golem fell to the ground. The only chance Korin knew had just collapsed. This truly was a special level difficulty. Marott Dunalev revealed her true terror. Duel became extremely weak, and Korin ordered her to withdraw. Remaining there in that state would only put her in danger. When Duel retreated, Jagger wondered what they would do alone. Korin concluded that Marietti had already used all her long-range attacks. Now it was time for close combat. He took his spear and charged, closing the distance. Korin, Jagger, and Drawn managed to block the next blood spears. Drawn in particular tried once again to pierce the blood orb, but failed yet again. This time, however, Jagger managed to help him. Korin hammered the sword as if driving in a nail, shattering the blood orb. In the next instant, however, he lowered his guard, as Mariott's third phase was activated, the blood field. Drawn and Yeager were knocked down in the blink of an eye. Korin immediately understood that everyone was trapped inside that field. When the blood orb was destroyed, an automatic trap was activated. The pressure that spread across the area was absurd, almost crushing. Mariott's essence, which until then had maintained only minimal defense, was forced to react. The remaining orb forcibly drained her blood, and from it created a great blood guardian. Korin was the last one still standing. He had not imagined that it would end like this. Normally, facing that situation would require at least 3 people by his side. Even so, that no longer mattered. He was determined enough to defeat her with his own hands. When one is born human, it is natural to distinguish livestock from people. It is also natural to shrink back and close one's eyes when witnessing the desperate struggle of something that does not want to die. Marietta, however, in that sickened state, felt something strange in her throat. She was instinctively drawn to the neck of someone whose name she did not even know. She bit. Her canines, which had always been there, pierced the skin and reached the veins of that poor girl. The body trembled and struggled to survive, but that did not matter at that moment. Mariette felt no need to look away. The painful sound of moans seemed like a distant melody, while the warm blood flowed to her lips and down her throat. For the first time, she felt sated. When everything ceased and her heartbeat returned to normal, disgust came immediately after. Her body, now full of vitality, seemed to collapse. She realized what she had done. That had not been the hunt of a monster. That had been a crime. She had almost killed her own friend. Upon realizing that she had treated someone dear as livestock, Mariette felt her stomach churn and ran away, trying to distance herself before hurting anyone else. Even so, Korin chased after her. The great blood guardian roared before him and spat several spiked spheres. Korin advanced without hesitation. He executed the 6-step thrust. On the 4th step, he activated the returning heaven spin, cutting all the spheres with a spinning attack. Forced to react, the creature summoned 2 more blood wolves. That was not a problem. Korin Korin had vast experience dealing with wolves. He dodged both attacks and pierced them with his spear using the mountain throw. It was far too simple. The Guardian grew even more furious and accelerated to the point that it seemed to vanish. Korin remained calm. He knew that victory did not mean mastering every technique, but finding a weakness and acting at the right moment. When the opening appeared, he advanced. The spear struck the Great Guardian's ribs with the crawling serpent strike, followed by the venomous dragon exit. The impact was devastating. The Guardian was defeated. The blood field dissolved. The creature weakened, melted, and returned to being nothing more than blood scattered across the ground. Even so, Marott continued to be possessed by a terrifying power. She had reached her final phase. As soon as this phase began, one member of the group was immediately placed in critical condition. For that reason, she could not be defeated by a single person. At that moment, Korin was completely alone. Overwhelmed by bloodlust, Marott advanced, ready to finish him. With no one to help him, Korin was struck directly in the neck. Marott activated blood absorption and began to drain his life. Even so, he endured. Korin possessed the regeneration of warrior persistence. He withstood the damage while returning to that vampire the same gentleness everyone knew. In the end, he was an adult facing a lost child. He gently stroked her head, remaining steady. Little by little, Marott began to realize what she was doing. Not even historical figures had managed to resist this impulse. Duke Sabantia awakened as a vampire and drained the blood of his own servant. Even great commanders of the past failed before this thirst. Marott, who had always lived by feeding on monster blood and drinking seawater, only worsened her condition. Instead of relieving it, that made her thirst even more intense. It took a month for Marott to be captured by Park Si-ho in the other life. Even so, throughout the entire period she was free, Marott killed no one. She resisted the temptation, and because of that, Korin wanted to believe that a different ending could still exist. When Marott realized what she was doing, she apologized to her junior. It did not matter how many times Korin had nearly died, nor that she was only a first-ranked mage. The fact that she was a vampire was also secondary to him. Korin did not see her as a mere source of income, as Suro did, but through the teachings of his master, whom he met in that world. That woman, whom he initially despised for being only a game NPC, protected him by saying that he was still just a child. As the chosen successor in her final moments, and as a disciple who studied her teachings, it was natural that Korin now acted like an adult. Because of that, he made it clear to Park Si-ho that he would follow a different path from his. Later, in the special prison created personally by Professor Josephine, Marott was sitting inside the cage, eating a sweet potato. Even though she was imprisoned, Korin went to visit her. He asked for permission to enter, and the professor asked whether it would be safe. Korin answered yes, and said that he trusted her. Upon entering the cell, Korin asked Marott to eat slowly so she would not choke. He truly thought her sense of taste would change after becoming a vampire, but it did not. She still loved potatoes. Marott explained that potatoes had always tasted great, were resilient and delicious, and that there was no way not to like them. When Korin approached, Marott asked him not to come closer, saying that she smelled bad. Korin replied that when she had drained his blood, she had not been clean either. Even so, Marott stepped back and stayed far away from him, even inside the cell. She confessed that she was afraid, because she thought she would die that day. Korin reflected that he met Frieren and ended up awakening something in her. He was the one who changed the fact that Frieren would not participate in the hunting field. Frieren, by coincidence, met Marott during training. Frieren had to use her true power, which ended up triggering Marott transformation. Despite everything, Marott was deeply impressed by Korin. She wondered how he managed to stand up and not give up. Everyone had always mocked him, but he persisted and in the end managed to win. To her, he was incredible. Korin thought that was an exaggeration. He said he was not that impressive and that he simply liked happy endings, where the good guys are rewarded and the villains punished, simple and instructive stories. He said that Marott was a wonderful person, kind and beautiful, and that he wished she could also have a happy ending. What he truly meant was that he wanted to save her and that he had enjoyed doing so. Marott became extremely embarrassed. She said she needed to finish washing the potatoes and asked him to leave. Korin agreed without any problem and said he would see her later. Then he left through a portal together with Professor Josephine. Alone, Marott thought that it had been good to be comforted, but she was still not sure about anything. She did not know if she truly had the right to be happy. Later, Korin reflected that Marott would be temporarily isolated. This normally happened in the game's story. He believed that this isolation would end soon, as long as the representative Frieren went to school without problems. Even if Marott had awakened as a demi-human, most people would not feel threatened by it. While walking through the corridors, Korin was approached by the headmaster. The man said that this was the first time they had met in person and asked how he was doing. Korin replied that he was doing great. Then the headmaster explained that he wanted to talk about Mariott's case and her punishment. Korin was caught off guard, as he did not expect her to to be punished. He tried to explain everything, but the headmaster said that the decision had already been made. Korin still tried to convince him otherwise, mentioning that Marott was a senior student, but he was interrupted. The headmaster said that it had only been a test and revealed that there would be no punishment at all. He also did not believe that Marott was dangerous. What he wanted was to observe the attitude of someone who had truly fought against her. Finally, he asked Korin not to worry, because Marott isolation would end soon. The headmaster explained that they still needed to confirm her stability first. In any case, he had already heard many stories from other students, but he was curious about the real details of what had happened. Because of that, he asked Korin to explain the situation more clearly. The pregnant woman tries not to make any sound, even covering her mouth because she is so terrified. Soon after, other people appear, and the man warns them that the bastard is coming. A woman next to him apologizes, as she is extremely frightened. The man tells them that they need to get away as quickly as possible. The headmaster sincerely thanked Korin for helping to prevent a great danger caused by the inexperience and complacency of the adults. He also apologized and said that if Korin needed anything in the future, he would do his best to repay him. Korin thought that he was a headmaster worthy of an academy, someone who recognized his own failures and tried to take on more responsibility. That reminded him of his master. He recalled the words she had said to him in his past life and, because of that, decided to trust the headmaster goodwill. The only request he made was for the man to raise his head, as there was no need to humble himself like that. Later, lying on the prison bed, Marott remembered the moment when Korin saved her with his strong arms. She felt warmth and affection coming from him. In that moment, all she could do was apologize and cry. Since Marott had always been someone who cared more about others than about herself, guilt took over her heart. Because of that, she did not resist Professor Josephine Magic at any moment and accepted being imprisoned. She remained alone behind the iron bars. When Korin came to visit her, Marott pretended to be fine, but in truth, she was completely exhausted. She saw herself as a beast, a monster, a demon, an enemy of humanity. Even so, Korin wanted to see her reach a happy ending. His words sounded kind and sincere to her. Marott remembered the devotion of that boy who did not hesitate to put his own body at risk to save her. That warm and intense moment, combined with his goodwill and sincerity, made her face blush slightly. Marott realized that this fragment of her life would be forever etched into her memory. Sin embargo, Isabelle fue a visitarla. Y lo primero que hizo fue abrazarla fuertemente, preguntando si estaba bien y cómo se sentía. Marott preguntó si no le tenía miedo. Isabel se disculpó y dijo que había visto todo antes de desmayarse, incluida la cara de Marott, llena de arrepentimiento después de la mordida. After 1 week, Marott officially left isolation. When she returned, she was warmly welcomed, but her greatest concern was Isabel. She believed that her friend should hate her after what had happened. Marott even thought that she should disappear from the academy. En realidad, Isabel solo logró salir porque ese alto estudiante de primer año la ayudó en secreto, pero él ya había desaparecido. Aún así, Marott sabía exactamente quién era. Una vez más, había sido ayudada por Korin. Pensar en él comenzó a suceder cada vez con más frecuencia. Isabel said that, no matter what happened, she would always consider Marott her friend, and wanted her to think of her as an inseparable friend. Marott began to cry, saying that she thought she would be hated. Isabel explained that, to be honest, she had already felt better after some time, but the hospital doctors prevented her from leaving, which made it impossible for her to meet Marott right after the isolation. In reality, Isabel only managed to leave because that tall freshman secretly helped her, but he had already disappeared. Even so, Marott knew exactly who he was. Once again, she had been helped by Korin. Thinking about him began to happen more and more often. That was how the first part of the story came to an end, with a happy ending for everyone. After everything that had happened, Korin organized a simple and solitary routine marked by the constant repetition of classes lunch, more classes training dinner, and more training. That exhausting schedule was necessary because he needed to become stronger and improve as quickly as possible, especially considering the situation involving the next girl who would appear in his life. As the days passed, he was already able to use new spear techniques with much greater efficiency. The final essence of the Serpent of Calamity and the exit of the Venomous Dragon were visibly more powerful, the result of intense and continuous training. During one of those days, Marott appeared and was impressed by how much Korin had pushed himself. She clearly noticed his growth and commented that he had worked hard that day. Korin noticed that Marott had returned to her routine as if nothing serious had happened, and on top of that, she had brought several foods. There were pancakes, sandwiches, and even pasta, all made from potatoes. Korin felt even hungrier at the sight of it and decided to eat with gratitude. However, when he tried to grab the food, blood began to run down his wrist because of the injuries from training. Marott had to restrain herself because she was now a vampire. Seeing the fresh blood, her instincts reacted, and she almost lost control, even starting to salivate. To avoid problems, she took out a small bag of blood she carried with her. It became clear that there was a big difference between fresh blood and blood stored in bags. Marott commented that Corin blood might be especially tasty, but soon realized how strange that sounded and apologized, visibly embarrassed. Corin compared the situation to the difference between organic and industrialized products, or between frozen meat and freshly cut meat. Marietta agreed with the comparison. Corin then joked casually that she was destined to consume only stored blood for the rest of her life, but quickly added that he would not mind if she drank his blood from time to time if she wanted. That made Marietta even more embarrassed. Corin explained that his body would regenerate anyway, and that when she got tired of blood bags, she could look for him or even drink a little right then. Marietta asked him not to say that kind of thing. Trying to change the subject, Marott handed Corin a gift she had been hiding. She revealed with great embarrassment that it was vampire blood, explaining that it would be good for his body. Corin drank it in front of her, which made her even more flustered. Right after that, the system indicated that he had consumed a second-rank life elixir. Corin's maximum aura increased to 500, and he gained 10 points distributed evenly. He realized the taste was not the best, but he clearly felt his body had grown stronger. Even so, he commented that the elixir was excellent. With this new power, Corin believed he was ready to begin the next scenario, which involved Alicia Arden. Alicia was a direct descendant of the renowned Arden sword family and a second-ranked knight. Her life had changed greatly since the start of the academy. After facing a barrier she had never encountered before, when comparing herself to a fifth-ranked knight, she realized she needed to improve. Since then, she had been putting in more effort, although until not long ago, she was known for her laziness and for walking around carefree, always eating honey bonbons. Deep down, Alicia only followed that path because of pressure from her family. She had no great ambitions nor a true passion for swordsmanship. Despite possessing genius-level talent with the sword, her attitude left much to be desired, making her a problematic student. She preferred frivolous activities, such as eating sweets and shopping, and she was satisfied with that lifestyle. It was during one of those carefree moments that Corin approached her, noticing that Alicia had not been frequenting the training hall. She justified it by saying she had many tasks and missions. Corin then commented that he knew of an opportunity that would earn a lot of money. Alicia, confused, wondered why he kept insisting on seeking her out. Being near Corin made her uncomfortable because she felt she could not rely only on her natural talent. Even as a recognized second-rank swordswoman and the granddaughter of a sword genius, Corin training methods seemed too harsh for her. Even so, when Corin explained that the mission would pay 2 gold coins and had second-rank difficulty, Alicia immediately calculated how many honey bonbons she could buy with that amount and accepted the proposal without hesitation. Corin informed her that the main mission would take place in the middle of the following week, but also mentioned a short-term mission that would pay 20 silver coins and could be done that same day. Alicia readily agreed. Corin concluded that, in the end, all Alicia needed was money, something simple and straightforward. He believed that was already enough to start the planned scenario. He was not completely sure, but based on his predictions, there was a strong chance that the events would begin later that very day. In fact, Alicia liked the patrol missions available on the mission board. They consisted of following a route designated through the city and checking if there were any problems. It was simple work since the monsters that approached the city usually did not go beyond 4th or 5th rank, with rare exceptions of mid-level creatures. There were no major challenges, but the financial reward was satisfactory. Above all, Alicia liked the attention and praise she received during this type of mission, which made everything even more enjoyable for her. Alicia liked having her power and talent reaffirmed by other people, because at home she was constantly looked down on by her own family. Deep down, she was not as bad as they said. Hearing praise during the patrol made her feel a little better about herself. It was at that moment that Corin noticed something ahead and pointed out the presence of an owlbear in the area. Alicia handled the situation without difficulty, and that day patrol continued calmly, safely, and without incidents, as long as nothing unexpected happened. Shortly after, a flare exploded in the sky, indicating an alert issued by the previous patrol group. That meant the discovery of a monster nest of at least rank 2. The worrying detail was that it was not a common signal, but a magical flare that could only be seen with special glasses. Realizing this, Alicia became discouraged, understanding that something truly serious had happened. In contrast, the other members of the group became excited, commenting that they had beside them the granddaughter of the sword genius. Corin concluded that his predictions were correct. The rank 2 monster nest found by the previous group was composed of wolves led by a werewolf. The creature was the same one Alicia had defeated before, even while poisoned, during the incident involving Sihu. This time the werewolf was defeated with even greater ease. However, a new enemy appeared right after that Dullahan, a rank 1 monster. Upon seeing the Dullahan, Alicia became truly worried. She was not yet fully prepared to face that type of enemy, but even so, she drew her sword and executed the Arden-style single-strike domain rupture. Despite the strength of the attack, the Dullahan, still mounted on his horse, managed to evade and counterattack, grabbing Alicia with his claws made of bone. Realizing she would not be able to defeat it alone, she asked Corrin for help. The pride of a warrior was not something Alicia possessed, but one of the soldiers warned that Corrin was busy facing another monster at that moment. At the instant Alicia was about to be struck by the Dullahan blade, the creature's skull was shattered by a powerful blow. The monster fell dead to the ground like a sack of potatoes brought down by Marott. When Alicia tried to give thanks, she immediately recognized the sword used in that attack. The owner of the weapon stated that Alicia remained weak and lazy as always. That person was Lunia Arden, the eldest daughter of the renowned Arden family and the likely successor to the path of the sword genius. She questioned what was wrong with Alicia, criticizing her lack of retreat, identifying the Dullahan, her inadequate analysis of the enemy, and above all the fact that she had drawn her sword recklessly. Before Alicia could even apologize, Lunia made it clear that apologies were not enough. The consequences of Alicia's actions were entirely her responsibility, and hasty attitudes like that put other people in danger. To correct her posture, Lunia delivered a firm blow to her sister's shoulder, reinforcing that swordsmen of the Arden family should always appear and maintain confidence. Next, Lunia turned her attention to Corrin, who wondered if he had been noticed while observing Alicia and pretending to be busy. Lunia introduced herself as a great disciple-bearer of a divine sword. Corrin paid his respects and introduced himself as a disciple of the 8 suspended spears. Lunia asked if he was a friend of Alicia, and Corrin immediately understood the intention behind that question. Even so, he could not reveal his skill with the spear, since there were only 2 other known people besides him who mastered that technique. Lunia accepted Corrin's silence without pressing further. After the confrontation, the group informed the Pavilion Master that all monsters in the area had been eliminated. It was explained that the elite troops of the Arden family were formed by second-rank knights, known as the 5 Swords, all led by Lunia. Each of them was at least at the same level as Alicia, or even stronger. None of the swordswomen questioned whether they should pursue the monsters that had escaped. Lunia decided they would not, and ordered an immediate return, and at the last moment she called Alicia to accompany them. Swordsmen usually traveled in groups because those known as sword factions were in essence fencing organizations similar to clans. They followed their leaders united around common ideals, and over time came to see themselves as true sects. 60 years earlier, the sword genius Garant had initiated a new generation of swordsmen. As the head of the family, at the time began spreading the concept of martial arts schools, the Arden family established itself as a renowned fencing lineage representing the entire continent. Later at the Arden studio, located in Merkaba Lunia, the leader of that place demonstrated her absolute authority, her strict discipline, and even behavior reminiscent of a gang leader, as she confronted all the apprentices. She formally introduced herself and greeted the first Pavilion Master. Those present wondered what was happening, because even though she was the great disciple of the family, they did not understand why she had made Alicia kneel. Lunia began listing the missions Alicia had completed, mentioning patrols, merchant escorts, and even rank 4 monster hunting groups. To her, all of that was absurd. She then questioned the cafeteria assistant mission. Alicia explained that it was a job where one wore a uniform and handed out flyers saying she had simply found the uniform pretty. Lunia reacted by calling it ridiculous and criticized the fact that Alicia was using the Guardian certification received as a favor from the main family for something so trivial, asking if she intended to stain the Arden name. She continued by pointing out that all those missions involved only low-rank monsters and asked whether Alicia enjoyed being called a heroine. At that moment, Alicia remembered her grandfather, words, realizing that she could not run away from her own essence. Later, after sending her back to Merkaba, some girls commented that the younger sister looked healthy and had even gained a little weight. Lunia agreed, but asked whether any of them knew the boy who was always walking close to Alicia. They replied that Corrin was just a rank C knight. Lunia immediately denied it, stating that he was by no means just rank C. She had noticed that Corrin's gaze remained on Alicia from the beginning to the end of the battles, and that the monsters barely managed to attract 20% of his attention. That was not mere common experience, nor simple practice. As for his spear skill at first glance, it seemed basic, but someone who had reached the peak of the Arden style could perceive the depth of that technique. Lunia knew the path of that spear art. Although she believed it had been only a brief encounter, she was satisfied that Alicia Friend continued to stay by her younger sister's side. She commented that she had received a request from the academy and that she might have the chance to see that boy again. The next day during Corrin's next training, it became clear that whenever Marott, also known as the Lady of Potatoes, appeared, she brought a large amount of food. There was potato pie with minced lamb potato fritters, potato pancakes, and potato pasta. Corin ate while asking about the meat. Marott asked if he had noticed that it was fresh meat. Corin felt emotional, thinking that while she lived a sad life as a vampire, consuming frozen meat, he was there eating something so delicious. It was delicious and moving. Marott said that next time she would bring a steak or perhaps oxtail. Corin held her hands and said that he liked that very much. She asked if he was talking about the food, and he confirmed, saying that in that case he would be happy if she brought oxtail next time. Marott commented that he had big hands full of scars, the hands of someone who worked hard. At that moment, Isabel approached and caught the scene, becoming quite shocked. Marott told Corin that she would see him later and left with Isabel to avoid her seeing anything else. Corin thought that he did not really understand the children of that city. In his previous life, he had not managed to date even once for 3 years because of Sihu interference. He had had some affairs, but never managed to maintain a relationship because Sihu ended up killing all the women involved. His current relationships, even if platonic, were completely different from those of his past life. Sometimes Duel brought him rare and precious mushrooms from the forest. After that, they went straight to the library and began the Ogham alphabet lessons. Drone also looked for him frequently, but Corin considered him more of a useful colleague than a friend, since the two always ended up fighting monsters together. Whenever difficult missions appeared, Drone asked for his help. Even so, the people Corin spent the most time with were Jiger and Lark. At that moment, however, the two of them became frightened when someone appeared behind Corin. He turned around and wondered if it was a monster. Technically, it could even be considered one. It was Frieren standing right behind him. Corin thought that she really was a kind of monster, but she only mentioned the promise related to food. He then remembered that he had promised to pay for a meal for her more than a month earlier. Corin told Jiger and Lark, who were terrified, that they could leave. The two ran away. Later, Corin took Frieren to a seafood restaurant because he thought she resembled a cat. She truly loved the fish, but ate it in a somewhat strange way. Corin explained that it was not respectful to the food and that one needed to savor every aspect of it. He placed the fish on top of some rice and explained that instead of just consuming it, was important to observe smell and appreciate the aroma. That was respect for food. Frieren learned the lesson and began eating that way. Even so, Corin remained worried about other matters that still occupied his mind. The production of the weapons was almost complete. It was still a bit early, but Corin Locke knew that the second part would begin soon. The introduction of this new phase was the exam week, and Jiger was completely desperate because he had studied nothing. Lark commented that there was no point in trying to learn something minutes before the exam. Jiger complained that Lark should have been stricter with him, while Lark asked whether Corin had studied. Corin replied that he did not need to worry, because it was not the first time he had taken that exam. However, when he received the assessment, Corin realized that it was very different from the previous ones. There was an extremely complicated math question. When the exam ended, he was completely exhausted. His answer sheet was blank. Even Jiger had managed to answer at least 2 questions. It was at that moment that Corin realized something important. In his past life, he had never truly studied. He only focused on advanced skills and never delved into the basic knowledge of that world. Even so, he calmed down because a written exam like that was not decisive. He intended to redeem himself in the festival conference hall. The highlight of the semester exams was one of the easiest events in the game. It was the optional test, a valuable opportunity to recover the grades that had plummeted in the written exam. In these tests, teams of 15 students faced professors from the night faculty or invited temporary instructors. Performance was evaluated directly by the instructors in charge. Since Corin was only ranked C, the instructor level should not be high, which meant practically guaranteed points. That expectation collapsed when everyone was shocked to see the instructor Lunia Arden, who was there specifically to observe Corin Locke. Corin wondered why she was present. Shortly after the practical test of the first-year Group A began, there were special guests for that evaluation. The elites of the renowned Arden fencing family, known as the 5 Swords of the First Pavilion, were present. They stated that they would take it easy. When the combat began, everyone advanced, including Drone. Corin realized that although all 5 swords were ranked 2 among the students, there were also fighters of that level. Even so, when they used the Arden sword formation, combining 5 strikes in perfect synchronization, all the students were devastated. A powerful gust of wind hurled them away. Drone knew that the chances of victory were not high. Against an experienced group, they blocked vision, maintained solid formations, and possessed extensive battle experience. Even so, Drone used one of his magnetic swords to disperse the smoke around him. At that moment, Melia, the ghost sword, advanced directly, making it clear that the 5 swords were ambushing the students one by one. Alicia was attacked by Jenny, the Swift Sword. Jenny assessed the situation and concluded that among the 15 students, 6 of them were already more than enough. With extreme ease, Jenny knocked Alicia down with a sweep, pointing out that her stance was completely unbalanced. Alicia was almost hit in the head, but managed to dodge at the last moment. The audience erupted into chaos as the students were crushed by the 5 swords of the first pavilion. One by one they fell, leaving only Drone and Alicia standing. Drone launched his spiritual swords of fire and iron. His combat experience finally began to hold its own against the 5 swords. When the dust settled, he managed to summon his 5 magic swords, showing clear signs that he could reach victory. On the other hand, Alicia was under increasing pressure. Jenny stated that she needed much more practice. She commented that at that rate, as the possible heir of the sword genius, she might not even need to worry about graduating, since it would be better to abandon the academy. Alicia, however, refused to accept that idea. Even so, when she blocked another of Jenny's attacks, she became extremely dizzy and fell to the arena floor. Jenny concluded that Alicia still had a long road ahead of her. In the original storyline, Lunia Arden was supposed to take on the role of guiding Alicia, but Corin wondered why she had become the instructor of Group B. When Lunia announced that they would begin aura refinement training, everyone became apprehensive. She explained that it should be treated as an experience equivalent to facing a special rank enemy. A special rank was a monstrosity capable of facing an army alone, a disaster that even dozens of guardians were not sure they could defeat. It was the kind of creature most guardians would never encounter in their entire lives, a being that eventually became legend. However, when it came to Lunia, the situation was different. She was someone capable of facing monsters of that level because only a monster could defeat another of the same tier. Her first attack completely shattered the arena, opening a crater in the center and hurling chunks of the ground and several students far away. Yeager almost died from the impact and complained that the instructor was going way too far. Corin evaluated the situation and concluded that, in truth, she was still holding back because if she were truly serious, she would have already killed everyone there. Yeager was still carrying Lark, who was foaming at the mouth because he thought the poor guy would die if left on the ground. Corin observed the situation and sincerely thought that Lark might already be dead. Before any other reaction was possible, a new attack knocked Yeager and Lark down at the same time. Lunia declared that they were far too insignificant to receive her guidance and demanded that Corin appear immediately. Only Corin and Zeno remained standing, and Corin raised his arms by instinct, considering the possibility of surrendering. Lunia made it clear that if he wanted a terrible grade, he could do that, but she would not allow it. To her, it would be a waste to lose the rare opportunity to face her. Corin was extremely nervous, his body gripped by chills, but he remembered that many times in the past, he and Lunia had fought side by side as comrades. She had been his spearmaster, and it was no exaggeration to say that Lunia was the one who truly taught him how to fight on the battlefield. Even at the end of his past life, he was never a match for her. Still, this was a wall he would have to overcome someday, and he decided to try now. The decision pleased Lunia, and the confrontation began with sword against spear. The exchanges were fast and intense. Even though he managed to block and counterattack, Corin was clearly the more exhausted and pressured one in the fight. His attacks did not even come close to hitting her, while Lunia dodged with extreme ease. The spectators began to question how someone of rank 5 could defend himself like that against Lunia Arden. At a certain point, Corin could barely breathe. Lunia noticed that he had run out of energy and sheathed her sword. For a moment, Corin thought she believed he had already pushed himself enough, but he soon realized that was not it. That was the beginning of domain rupture, one of the most powerful techniques of the Arden family. When Lunia drew her sword again, she released her killing intent. The pressure was so intense that even the people in the stands had difficulty breathing. Some teachers became alarmed, questioning whether she intended to kill the student, and some called for the immediate end of the test. It was already too late. Lunia had executed the single cut of domain rupture. At that moment, it felt as if time itself had stopped. The translucent reflection of Lunia Arden moved within the frozen time toward Corin, while the sword advanced slowly. Corin, almost motionless and gripped by fear, pushed his spear with everything he had. He could barely move, as if he were trapped within the domain itself. Perhaps what had happened before with Marietti had only been a coincidence. Perhaps he could no longer control that power. Still, he took a deep breath and understood that he did not need to be perfect. He only needed to move forward one step at a time. The tip of Corin's spear collided directly with the edge of Lunia's sword, causing a massive explosion at the point of impact. Lunia recognized that it had been pure instinct, not knowledge. It was a sensation of omnipotence, as if he were at the center of the world. In the end, Kron managed to respond to the domain. Lunia decided to end the test right there, and judged that more important than anything else, Corin needed a better spear since his equipment was far too weak for his abilities. The proof was right in front of everyone because Corin's spear had literally been split in half. Meanwhile, Alicia watched everything with completely unfocused eyes. Lunia commented that the test itself was not even that important to her and questioned whether Corin had avoided the fight simply to show his domain. She also made it clear that she knew Alicia's talent. Korn reflected that even though he had lost the fight, he had achieved his objective. Lunia informed him that she would remain in the city for a while due to a job, and left a clear warning for him not to be arrogant or try to interfere. She herself would crush the threat she intended to face. Shorin thought that now that Korn had shown his domain, perhaps things would not unfold exactly as Lunia planned. Shortly afterward, it was announced that by unanimous decision of the instructors, Korn had received the highest grade and additional points in the practical exam. Many students felt the result was fair, since he had practically fought Lunia alone. Some teachers disagreed, saying it made no sense, while another recognized that he was the same student who had tried to capture spiritual bodies. Fermax wondered how he was using techniques that seemed to belong to someone else. A few days later, Korn went in search of a better weapon, since that need had existed even before Lunia mentioned the problem. The blacksmith grew suspicious and wondered who the hell that boy was. The academy provided precious and rare ingredients without hesitation, yet he still questioned how Korn knew his family's secret methods. Korn treated it as something insignificant, since he had performed that process many times in his past life. To acquire ingredients that expensive, it would normally take several hundred gold coins, and there were hardly any players willing to pay everything in cash. The common method was to craft weapons using ingredients obtained in scenarios or missions. Even so, Korn possessed special soul powder, a rank 2 runic stone, and a rank 1 silver stone, in addition to the unconditional support of the director. With that, he could obtain one of the few weapons capable of controlling domain. In the end, he obtained a legendary weapon, the Spear of the Silver Knight of the Shadow Realm. Meanwhile, Alicia was overtaken by bad memories, recalling the first time she had taken part in a real battle. She remembered splitting a rank 5 monster in half, and the grimace she made upon seeing blood and entrails scattered across the ground. The smell of human blood, however, was completely different. Even though it was her first experience, she instantly recognized that intense and terrible odor, which represented nothing but the final spasms and agony of a life fading away. At that moment, Alicia was heading out to work again, this time on a real mission. Capturing a werewolf would earn 70 silver coins, which was far better than the other urgent mission involving the vampire known as the Mist Assassin of the city. Alicia refused that option because she did not like excessively dangerous things. Deep down, there was a subconscious reason she had chosen a mission involving werewolves. Even so, she wondered where her savior might be at that moment. The other guardians complained loudly when Korn appeared, saying it was a curious coincidence. Alicia noticed that the veterans did not have friendly expressions at all. Because of the quota system, the Guardians Association was forced to tolerate the participation of core rank students. Even so, Korn felt relieved that Alicia was there with him. The other guardians could not say anything openly in front of the granddaughter of the Sword Emperor, but the looks they cast were so intense they seemed to pierce the back of his neck. Korn then asked Alicia how her vision was doing. Alicia asked if he had heard that from her sister. Korn replied that, in a way, yes, but stressed that she needed to hurry. Lunia was serious and truly intended to destroy her to the point where Alicia would no longer be able to wield a sword. Alicia commented that she could simply stop using a sword when that happened. Korn knew that would not solve the problem, but he also had no intention of giving up there. Later, the group arrived at the werewolves' nest, where there were 2 adult werewolves and approximately 20 hunting dogs. The group dealt with the dogs without much difficulty and managed to hunt one of the werewolves. However, the situation took a strange turn when countless werewolves appeared all at once. People began to wonder where the 5th rank boy was. No one knew for sure, but Alicia was doing very well, taking down several werewolves on her own. Soon after, lupine ghosts began to appear alongside the werewolves. Alicia found that strange because places with few humans normally did not attract evil spirits, which indicated that all of that had been deliberately caused. Then another creature appeared, a ghost knight, who struck Alicia's sword with a heavy axe. She wondered why the other guardians were not attacking, until she realized that one of them, who seemed to be approaching to help, had actually tried to attack her from behind. By pure reflex, Alicia used a sharp slash and split the 2 ghosts in half. At that instant, she smelled human blood again and wondered if she had killed a companion. That distraction almost cost her life as another ghost knight advanced toward her. Before the attack could land, Korn pierced the creature's head with the tip of his spear and scolded Alicia for standing still. He explained that those creatures were not people, but bodies reanimated by dark magic. Alicia was confused, but Korn clarified that the main event of the opening of the second part was the subjugation of the vampire assassin. Normally, this serial killer, whom Marott failed to capture in the first part, would begin to stalk the player's group. If someone chose the mission to capture werewolves during that period, they would end up encountering the assassin known as John Doe, and would be able to repel his attack after facing him. That was exactly why Korn was there. Suddenly, a gigantic ghostly presence appeared before them. Alicia was frightened by the sight, but Korin ordered everyone to prepare to flee immediately. He advanced first using the fifth step of his spear, the pagoda tree mountain, pinning the creature's ghostly cloak against a tree far above the ground. For a moment, Korin wondered if he had truly died, but quickly dismissed the idea. It would not make sense for that being to be the boss of the opening act. Based on John Doe's peculiarities, it was possible to face him alone. John Doe himself acknowledged that it had been impressive since Korin had destroyed his puppet. He decided to end things there for the day, but made it clear that he expected to meet that boy again in the future. Korin knew that John Doe was powerful, but his true specialty was stealth. The cloak that had been struck transformed into a crimson mist. When the life of the undead mage that served as the source of that mist reached zero, the death mist was activated. What Korin had destroyed was nothing more than a puppet, a device used to trigger the mist created from the corpse of a mage. That was exactly why capturing John Doe was so difficult, because he possessed several of these puppets. Korin ordered everyone to flee immediately because that mist was extremely dangerous. Alicia asked if he was going to leave the spear behind, but Korin said it was fine. He activated the return rune, and the spear returned directly to his hand. Alicia found that incredible, but at that very moment, one of the mercenaries stumbled and fell along the way. Alicia was the first to try to rescue him and ended up being grabbed by a giant hand that emerged from within the mist. Korin found that far too irritating and told the mercenary to run away immediately. Then Korin borrowed the cloak and charged straight into the mist. He never thought he would have to do that twice. In his past life, he had stumbled and panicked in that mist, reaching a critical state in just a few minutes. Now with regeneration, he could endure longer, but it was still lethal. The real problem was Alicia. Suddenly, her blood began to be drained by the mist. Korin knew that the death mist drained every drop of a person's blood until death. Desperate, Alicia thought about cutting the claws that held her, but she no longer had the strength to do so. She remembered Lunia, who had once questioned that deplorable state of hers. Then Alicia let go of the sword. She thought she had been weak and mentally apologized to everyone who had trusted her. Deep down, she wanted to become someone worthy of respect in the eyes of her savior. At that moment, Korin returned as her true savior, and in desperation tried to reach her. When he got close, Alicia said that at that rate he could die, and asked him to save her. Korin told her not to worry, placed the hood over her, and explained that attacking the claws at random would not work. He put the sword back in her hand and asked her to focus and remain calm. From that moment on, he would protect Alicia from the undead. Alicia knew what she needed to do, but said she did not have enough energy because she was injured and dizzy from the mist. Korin stated with conviction that she could do it. Among all the swordsmen he had known, Alicia possessed the greatest raw talent. If she made the decision, all she needed was to take a single step forward. That would be enough. Then Korin advanced alone against the undead. He knew he also would not be able to remain there for long, and it was obvious that, being of a lower rank, his endurance was limited. Even so, if he did not say that to Alicia, she would have no choice but to face her fear. Alicia decided to resort to her grandfather's secret technique, capable of cutting anything. To do so, she needed to awaken the perimeter eyes, a cursed ability that forced the vision of other domains. Tears fell mixed with blood emotions, were laid bare, and everything became fuel to advance toward the world where time seemed frozen. She then took the first step and executed the single-strike domain rupture. The attack eradicated all the monsters around, cut down the trees, tore through the forest, and lit up the skies once more. The mist vanished in the blink of an eye. With that, the other hunters approached and realized that one of the bodies on the ground was John Doe himself, the vampire assassin. Many wondered whether Alicia had cut the forest in half. Not even Korin expected that. He believed she would use only the third form or something similar, but Alicia had gone beyond. She was radiant happy to have finally succeeded. While everyone celebrated, Korin fell into despair. His plans had been completely ruined. The next day, the news made the front pages of every newspaper. John Doe had been defeated, and Alicia Arden was proclaimed the great heroine, receiving a massive performance reward. Many began to question whether the heir of the family would change. The Five Swords platoon was not pleased at all. Lunia reflected that the Arden family operated within the Sword faction and always moved according to the logic of power. In the face of Garand Arden's overwhelming charisma, they already anticipated who would be the next great swordsman to inherit that legacy. Domain rupture existed at the stage of the Path of the Heart, something unknown to most martial artists. Garand Arden had been waiting for a long time for someone capable of continuing his legacy. Lunia trained this technique while blood and sweat ran down her body. The calluses on her hands were proof of the harsh life she led. Even being called a genius of her generation, Lunia could not fully satisfy the Sword Emperor. Everything changed when her younger sister appeared. Alicia, an illegitimate child whom the head of the family brought from outside, had barely begun to wield a sword when she engaged in a friendly duel against her older sister. Lunia never imagined that one day she would worry about her as if she were a rival. In an unexpected moment, Alicia counterattacked as if she had been chosen by the path of the sword itself and landed a nearly lethal blow. Lunia could not even see the attack. It was not a matter of speed, but of pure domain. At that instant, Alicia took a deep step into the true path of martial arts, and Lunia wondered how that was possible. A small child, seemingly lazy, had done something that had taken her years to achieve. Then Lunia remembered the title her grandfather used to mention a distorted nature that ordinary mortals could not comprehend. Alicia possessed the talent of a demon. After that, the grandfather named Alicia as the main candidate for the future. She exceeded everyone's expectations, but even so, she was still Lunia's younger sister. The memory of stroking the hair of that half-sister, who had grown up abandoned by her paternal family, remained kept somewhere deep in her heart. Meanwhile, the five swords approached and asked if Lunia was all right. She noticed their concern and thought that she wished Alicia would also enter the domain. If she could see that sword one more time, perhaps she would be able to reach the level of her own grandfather. That was when Lunia summoned everyone to prepare for the sword challenge. Sometime later, Corin visited Alicia, who was recovering in the infirmary. He asked how she had managed to use the domain rupture, since seeing with the perimeter eyes did not, by itself, mean being able to execute the technique. Alicia replied that she simply believed she could do it, because Corinne believed in her first. Corin sighed, thinking that he also wished he were a genius like her. At that moment, Marietta appeared to visit the freshman and asked if Alicia was all right. They introduced themselves, and Corin asked whether Mariette had come specifically to visit her. Mariette answered yes, but questioned whether they were close. Corinne was confused by the question. Soon after, Warren appeared asking for more raw fish. Without realizing it, Corin had formed an unexpected group around himself, and Mariette was visibly bothered by Warren's presence, asking whether she had also received food. Corin told her not to worry, as he would prepare a wonderful snack for her as well. Even so, he thought that gathering such incredible and famous people together was too much to be just a coincidence. As rumors about Alicia's domain rupture spread, Corin concluded that Lunia would probably launch the sword challenge soon. He asked whether Alicia felt confident, and she clearly did not. The sword challenge was a tradition conducted by 5 master-level swordsmen, supposedly to test the master of the sword pavilion who would take over the internal affairs of the family. In practice, for a long time, this challenge had been used to eliminate competitors legally. Facing it meant risking death. Corin then presented a condition. If Alicia accepted, whenever he suggested fighting monsters or training, she could not refuse and would have to accompany him without complaining, becoming a permanent member of his group. Alicia accepted and swore loyalty. Corin, accepting that vow with everything he had learned throughout his life, officially acknowledged her decision. At that moment, one of the 5 swords was suddenly attacked by a dagger thrown by Huaren. She introduced herself as a master of the knife style and a challenger to Alicia's dojo. A mercenary questioned the reason for the sudden attack, and Huaren replied that she was doing it because she would get sushi if she won, starting the exchange of blows. Another of the 5 swords faced Corin himself, who introduced himself as a master of the Gandil style and leader of Alicia's dojo. He declared that he wished to learn from the distinguished master of the flowing sword, Lina, but knew that the best strategy was to attack before being attacked. The members of the new dojo were defined as follows: Corin Locke, master of the Gandil style; Warren, master of the knife style; Dronwarski, master of the flying sword style; Mariette, master of the Gandalf style; and Alicia Arden, director and master of the new dojo. As a result, the 5 swords of the first sword pavilion of the Arden family were defeated, not merely beaten, but completely annihilated. Lina asked Corin why he was doing all of that. He replied that it was to develop a new dojo like theirs, increase its fame, and expand aggressively. Corin knew this would end up featured in the media, because, according to family rules, the sword challenge was officially a test to choose a pavilion master. In reality, even Corin knew that it had always been just a way to crush competitors. For that reason, he explained that he would change the structure of the confrontation into a dojo challenge. The proposal would be to defeat the 5 swords one by one, following the traditional format of a martial arts dojo. In the end, the true objective was a one-on-one battle, sister against sister. Alicia thought that if she won and proclaimed Lunia's strength, no one would be able to touch her after that. For this reason, she decided to begin right there. The registration fee for a dojo involved the cost of purchasing the space and hiring a mercenary responsible for validating the challenge. All of this was handled by Mariette, who paid the initial expenses. She planned to be reimbursed as soon as she received the reward from John Doe's mission. Lunia approached, assessing the situation as interesting, but making it clear that it was still a mistake. To her, if Alicia wanted to run away, she should have fled the moment she saw her. It was evident that the dojo challenge had not been her idea either. Lunia's reaction confirmed that the plan had come from Corin Locke, although Corin himself gave Alicia the opportunity to say something in her defense. Alicia then formally proposed a friendly duel to the master of the Sword Pavilion, Lunia Arden, now as the new master of the Arden Dojo. Lunia accepted the duel, making it clear from the beginning that she did not use training swords or non-lethal weapons. Alicia showed that she was prepared for that. The two were ready to face each other, and the moment had come to resolve that dispute between sisters. Observing the scene, Marietta reflected that even using all of her strength as a vampire, she would have no guarantee of victory against Lunia. For that reason, she questioned Corin about Alicia's preparation. He showed absolute confidence in her. Faced with that, Marietta decided to trust as well, and the system recorded that the trust between them had reached the maximum level, with no change to the credibility ranking. Suddenly, Lena handed a bag of coins to Corin. He imagined it was a fee for dojo repairs, but she clarified that the amount was meant for a complete reconstruction. The first strike almost broke Alicia's sword, and the impact was so powerful that it completely destroyed the wall behind them. The next strike split the dojo in half. While blocking, Alicia thought about how she had always admired Lunia. When her passion for swords still burned intensely, her older sister was her greatest idol. Everyone praised her, saying she was as powerful as a fairy tale heroine. Alicia always felt encouraged around her, and Lunia usually returned that affection. All of that collapsed on the day Lunia cut down a human for the first time. Lunia advanced using her sharp aura, recalling her training. The first movement required a step backward, followed by a lateral counterattack, exactly what she executed with an irregular defense. In the past, Alicia was known for learning all the rules rigidly, but lacking skill in irregular attacks. In that moment, she proved that she had overcome that limitation, which provoked Lunia even further, nearly being knocked down by the following strike. Alicia knew she needed to compensate for her disadvantage with speed. In the blink of an eye, she appeared behind Lunia using the lightning charge technique. Lunia managed to react, almost cutting her younger sister's neck. Noticing the low guard, Alicia attacked with her own body instead of the sword, using a martial strike to try to knock her down. The response came in the form of a precise kick to the chin, forcing Alicia to retreat. Even so, Alicia remained standing, using all the techniques she had learned. She executed combined strikes, surprising Lunia, who acknowledged her sister's progress but made it clear that it would not be enough due to her inexperience. A kick to the stomach destabilized Alicia, making her lose her balance as she blocked the next strike. Despite the pressure, Alicia felt no fear. She was reaching Lunia, and more than that, she was beginning to see the entire domain of the fight. Lunia realized that this was exactly what she had always wanted to see. The strength she had denied existed in her younger sister. When Alicia sheathed her sword again, preparing for the next attack, Lunia immediately understood what she intended to do. Victory was just one step away. In response, Lunia also sheathed her sword and prepared herself. The two advanced toward each other. Lunia had been waiting for that moment. It was what she had always sought for Alicia to achieve. She remembered the day her younger sister said she wanted to become a swordswoman, as incredible as she was. Behind Alicia, Lunia saw Corin Locke, the master who had taught her to control the domain rupture. When the two ruptures collided, a massive explosion engulfed the field. The battle came to an end. The winner had been decided. The one kneeling on the battlefield was Lunia. Alicia had won, and Mariette celebrated even more than Corin, because he already knew that victory would happen. Compared to the master swordswoman, Lunia Arden, Alicia's only real advantage was the domain rupture. That was the only condition under which she could win. For that reason, Corin Locke instructed her to focus on dodging, retreating, and buying time, avoiding direct confrontations until creating the perfect opportunity to use the decisive strike. Victory was only possible within that specific limit of the fight. As expected in a clash of domains, the result was the cut to Lunia's sword. Faced with that, Alicia even wondered whether she had truly won. Lunia stated that her sister's performance was still not sufficient, but declared that from that moment on, neither she nor her subordinates would interfere in Alicia's work anymore. Then she turned her back and began to walk away. Before she could leave, Alicia asked her to wait. Corin thought Alicia might be frightened, which would have been understandable. After all, someone clearly weaker had defeated the master of the Sword Pavilion. It was natural to fear the looks Lunia would receive and the cold attitude of her sister as she turned her back. However, when Alicia approached, all she received was a gentle pat on the head. That concern made no sense. Corin remembered the first time he had met Lunia in his past life. It had happened even before the incident involving Mariette, far earlier than it should have occurred in the original storyline. Throughout all that time, Lunia tirelessly searched for Alicia's murderer, never finding them. The true culprit had been Siru. Even on the third anniversary of Alicia's death, Lunia continued her search. Corin often visited Alicia's grave and encountered Lunia there several times. She always appeared to pray on the anniversary of her sister's death. He even thought that Lunia hated her. Lunia admitted that she felt hatred, but explained that she saw Alicia as lazy, careless, and irritatingly clingy. Even so, Alicia was the only person capable of easing the bitterness she carried. Lunia would never turn her back on her sister. If something happened to Alicia, she would take full responsibility. If Alicia inherited the family leadership, Lunia would support her in silence. When she patted her sister's head, Lunia said that Alicia had grown a lot. That was the Lunia Arden Corin remembered. Alicia became so emotional that she began to cry, and the system officially notified that Lunia Arden had been defeated. Corin received the rewards, and later Alicia was already recovering in the infirmary. During her recovery, Alicia confessed to Corin that she was afraid of fighting, but that there was a part of her that entered battle with a smile on her face. Corin confirmed that he had noticed it. Alicia explained that she had always avoided fighting because it did not match who she was. She had been afraid of facing Lunia, pretended to be less serious in training, and sought only simple tasks. Corin commented that many people would do the same. Alicia stated that now that she had won, she would officially become an heir. Lunia and her followers would keep an eye on her, and if she ran away from that responsibility, her bond with her sister could break. Corin disagreed, believing that the relationship might become more distant, but would not be severed. In the end, they were still sisters. Corin praised Alicia, saying she had done an excellent job. He remembered when he was a child and was beaten by neighborhood bullies. What bothered him most was not the physical pain, but the anger at himself for being unable to defend himself. Alicia was far stronger than he had been at that age, and he hoped she felt proud of herself because what she had done was impressive. Alicia replied that Corin was a strange person, the same age as her, but spoke like an old man. Corin asked if he really seemed that old, considering that he had lived 14 more years in that life and still carried the memories from when he was 30. Mentally, he was already past 50. After that, Alicia simply thanked him for what had happened and for the incident in the forest. She asked whether it had been Corin who saved her life that day. He was surprised, as he believed she had been unconscious. Alicia explained that she recognized his voice and his belt. Corin commented that he did not know she was so clever and admitted that now that she knew, he could not lie. Alicia said she was very grateful for everything and that he could ask for anything. Corin asked only that they be friends. Alicia accepted, saying that she had never had a companion before and thought it would be something good. She wanted to have a male friend. Corin said they would get along well, and Alicia was happy to have someone reliable by her side. Corin knew that punishments awaited those with bad hearts, while a bright future awaited those with good hearts. For that reason, he wished for better choices for those children in the future. Meanwhile, Isabel Carmen, Mariette's best friend, was extremely worried about her. At that moment, she was watching yet another clumsy attempt at a love confession directed at Mariette. A young man offered his feelings along with a bag containing his own blood, even offering his own neck. Isabel considered it complete idiocy, as it only made Mariette even more uncomfortable. However, whenever Corin Locke approached, Mariette became visibly flushed, reacting differently upon seeing that tall, muscular man, sweaty and carrying an imposing sword. Isabel Carmen was, in fact, very worried about Corin Locke, the freshman who had been getting far too close to her friend Mariette. She knew Corin was only a rough-rank C knight, but that alone was not what bothered her. The real problem was the fact that he had managed to defend himself against the master swordswoman, Lunia Arden, which made it clear that he possessed real talent. What raised Isabel's suspicion the most was that Corinne and Marietta were often alone together, with the door locked. Left alone with her thoughts, she imagined what could be happening inside. At a certain point, she decided to stop and listen to their conversation. Corin was talking about a proposal related to the land they had acquired when registering the dojo. He explained that they could build an inn on that site and suggested that Mariette consider investing in the project. According to him, the profit would be tripled, a practically guaranteed bet. Isabel wondered whether that idiot was trying to do business with Mariette just because she was rich or because he thought he could take advantage of it. Later, in the training hall, Isabel witnessed Corin very close to Alicia, the second daughter of the Arden family. To make matters worse, he even handed her a voucher from the Santo Panda restaurant. That was the last straw. Isabel thought he was trying to win the girl over with food and that the restaurant was famous for being great for dates. In her view, after trying to seduce Mariette, he was now hitting on Alicia as well. Her anger was so intense that Isabel ended up falling from the ceiling beams straight to the ground. Even so, she did not care about the fall. She was completely furious with Corin. To her, he was not only getting close to two girls at the same time, but also never stopped talking about money. The following afternoon at the restaurant, Isabel still had to witness Corin next to Huaren feeding her sushi directly into her mouth. Isabel's concern only grew. In her mind, Corin was a shameless con artist. living a suspiciously comfortable life. And in fact, Korean was dealing with many numbers. Company registration costs, dojo renovation, and the hiring of mercenaries had added up to a total of 97 gold coins, all spent during the fight against Lunia. That amount had come entirely from Marott, something for which everyone should be extremely grateful, considering she had lent nearly 100 gold coins. Lunia Arden offered 50 gold coins for the renovation. Alicia received 110 gold coins as a mission reward. Warren also had substantial funds managed by her supporters. Yuel, Lark, and Yeager had savings of their own. Drawn, obsessed with wealth, possessed an absurd amount of gold. In the end, Corin managed to gather 550 gold coins, enough to purchase a huge plot of land. The plains on the outskirts of the city were empty, but in the second semester, there would be a friendly exchange festival with another academy. That made the investment even more promising. For Corin, knowing the future meant having valuable information on his side. Later, the director was speaking with Professor Josephine. He commented that the stance of the Catholic Church, the royal family, the Mage Tower, and the association toward the academy was far from favorable, but that it was not a problem they could solve at that moment. Josephine stated that she would support him, no matter what happened. The director explained that he would be taking a leave of absence for some time. With the other groups, the situation would be manageable, but the Catholic Church was a particularly hostile environment. For that reason, he refused when Josephine offered to go in his place. He only asked that she take care of the academy during his absence, and that if anything serious happened, she use the emergency communication network. After he left and closed the door, Josephine turned her attention back to the enormous pile of documents on the desk. Among them was a report on an experiment involving the regenerative power of a rejected vampire. There was also a request for permission to build a third dormitory, which had been postponed. She sighed and continued reviewing the paperwork. The next request caught her attention. It was a request made by Corin Locke. Josephine wondered with a certain weariness what that boy was up to this time. The document dealt with a request for the provision of land intended for the cultivation of mandrakes. Later at the test center in the west zone of the academy, Alicia looked around the place and wondered why they were harvesting mandrakes right there. The only thing Alicia knew about mandrakes was that they screamed loudly when pulled out. Corin Locke confirmed that this was exactly the case. For that reason, when harvesting mandrakes, it was necessary to be extremely careful not to rupture the eardrums. The use of good quality earplugs was mandatory, along with a wide space and open ground. With their ears properly plugged, the two prepared for the harvest. Corin explained that it was not possible to harvest a mandrake alone. One person had to hold the plant and pull it out by the root, while the other quickly cut the roots and the stem. Until that was done, the mandrake would keep screaming non-stop. That was the fourth time Corin had harvested mandrakes. In his past life, he did this work together with Siho. Even so, he still felt a little nervous. When the moment came, he pulled the mandrake with all the strength he had. As soon as the plant began to scream desperately, not even the earplugs were working properly. Corin shouted for her to cut it immediately, but it was already too late. Alicia began to foam at the mouth. He realized that she was not wearing the earplugs correctly. With no alternative, Corin had to deal with it alone. He struck the mandrake repeatedly until he finally silenced it. When everything was over, Alicia was lying on the ground, literally asleep. Corin felt his eardrums bleeding and tried to wake the girl by force. After some time, he thought that he might even like to harvest silver mandrakes, but concluded that he would probably die if he tried that. That was when Marietti appeared. She explained that she had some tests scheduled at the center that day, but the noise was unbearable, so she decided to leave. Literally, she left by jumping out the window. When she saw the two of them together, she asked what they were doing there alone. Corin replied that they were just harvesting some mandrakes. Marietta asked if there were still more and said that she would like to help. Corin tried to warn her that without being a knight, it was difficult to deal with that. However, it was already too late. Mariette pulled a mandrake out of the ground without using earplugs. A silver mandrake could easily kill them. Casually, Mariette commented that she had a mandrake garden at home and that just that year she had already harvested 30. She pulled the root out with her hand as if it were nothing at all. Corin found that simply incredible. Mariette asked if he intended to prepare an herbal decoction. Then she suggested that Alicia go get something to eat, clearly trying to get rid of her, and Alicia ran off right away. Corin asked what he needed to do, but Marietta replied that nothing was needed since she would take care of everything by herself. That made Corin very happy. He thought she was amazing, without realizing what was really going on, even though he had a much greater mental age than he appeared to have. There were two main ways to consume a mandrake. The traditional way was to eat the root directly. However, the most effective method was to prepare an herbal decoction. For that, it was necessary to add several types of roots and boil everything for more than 10 hours, creating an extremely potent medicine. While the mixture was boiling, Mariette asked what Corin was doing. He replied that he was a little bored, since there was nothing to do. Then he drew the runic alphabet on the ground. Mariette recognized the symbols, but said that she did not know their meaning, and asked where he had learned that. Korin explained that the runic alphabet was basically a dead language, and that it had been taught by his master. Before arriving in that new life, he spent a year learning runes and spear techniques with her. Not only martial arts, but also the original runes that she left behind. He learned not only the shapes of the runes, but also how to use them, because knowing the letters was not enough. The original runes were engraved directly onto the body and could only be used by a single person. One of the final boss objectives was to gather and possess that original rune. Korin's master tried to pass it on, but died before that because of that cursed enemy. Marott asked who exactly his master was. From his knowledge of runes, she imagined that the woman must have been a member of the Mage Tower. Korin replied that she was not. She was just an ordinary person, someone who could be found anywhere. He remembered her as someone kind, who always did her best. Marott commented that he spoke of her with great affection, and, changing the subject, asked if he wanted potatoes. Korin replied that it would be great. Then Marott called Deokgu, ordering him to bring the highest class familiar, the captain of the vampire orb, who appeared carrying a basket of potatoes. At that moment, the familiar was so well trained and gentle that he looked just like a little puppy. Marott commented that Deokgu was very cute. Korin Locke replied that calling him cute was a bit of an exaggeration, but reasoned that if Deokgu was made of blood, then half of the blood in his body should belong to him. Thinking about it that way, that would technically make Korin Deokgu's father. Marott felt embarrassed, admitting that she had never thought about that before. Then she suggested that Korin play a little with Deokgu. He replied that Deokgu was not a real dog, but in the next instant, they were already playing. The result was that Korin ended up completely overwhelmed. A 1-year-old vampire dog was far more energetic than he had imagined. After some time, the herbal decoction was finally ready. Korin was the first to try it. He was exhausted and sore, but upon consuming the mandrake decoction, his mana recovery capacity and his maximum mana amount increased drastically. Now he possessed truly respectable stats. Korin commented that Marott and Alicia should drink some as well. After all, there was no reason not to. Even though it was an extremely powerful herb, the effect of the mandrake only applied once. He thought that after they consumed it, he could give the rest to Lark and Yahello, who would certainly be very pleased. After that, only the silver mandrake remained. Korin decided to consume it directly by the root. As soon as he ingested it, the system notified him that an aura core had been created inside him. The aura core was a container responsible for storing a knight's aura. Normally, creating one required extreme training, but now Korin already had one. As his rank increased, he could acquire even more aura cores. Marott and Alicia immediately realized that he had become much stronger. Alicia suggested that he consume the golden mandrake as well, which would make him even more impressive. Korin refused, saying that he would do that later. Alicia concluded that consuming several herbs at once would probably be bad for the body. Korin agreed with that logic, although deep down, he had another reason for not doing it at that moment. Meanwhile, in another location, the same professor from before was discussing in the teacher's council that Korin Locke, classified as a 5th-ranked knight, should not remain in that position. He needed to be re-evaluated. The professors who had witnessed his feats agreed. Firma pointed out that Korin Locke had faced the swordmaster Lunia Arden directly. The confrontation lasted only 3 minutes. But even so, Korin remained standing until the end. This left the other professors quite shocked. One of them commented that perhaps Lunia had gone easy on him, since in tests, she usually used full strength even against children. Another professor questioned whether they really believed that Lunia had held back. He asked those present directly, but none of the witnesses answered. Deep down, everyone knew the truth. Lunia Arden had not restrained herself. Even so, one professor argued that increasing Korin's rank based on only a single test could be hasty. Even if there were reasons to recognize his ability, it might still be too early. The head professor then suggested that the official ranking evaluation be left to the association. He proposed that a re-evaluation under the pretext of issuing an official guardian certificate would be sufficient. The others agreed, recalling that Instructor Heyman himself had the authority to carry out this procedure. The head professor stated that this was exactly what he intended to do. With the matter of Korin Locke concluded, the council moved on to the next topic of the meeting. Even so, Firma continued thinking about the newcomer. Even a rank C seemed exaggerated when considering only the formal data. However, the duel against Lunia Arden had been undeniably impressive, and he could not stop thinking about that spear technique Korin had used. It was the technique of that other master, and he knew it. There was a real need to reevaluate that boy, and he would be there to observe. Later during class, Alicia sat right next to Korin, but he explained that the seat already belonged to Yeager. She apologized and said she would move, but he told her there was no need. When Yeager sat down in front of Korin, he shot him a clearly irritated look. He thought that he was close to the most famous person at the veteran Potato Academy, that extremely cute girl from the demonic tribe, and on top of that, Alicia herself. Yeager was filled with envy. To him, Korin looked like he was living the life of a dating simulation game protagonist, while he himself remained completely alone. The next class would be taught by Fermac. He informed them that, as he had said in the previous class, that day they would begin a group assignment. The class did not seem very excited, but Fermac said he would cheer them up quickly, since, being in a night academy, they would not receive difficult math tasks or activities like cultivating magical crops. With a snap of his fingers, he formed a large diagram made up of several sheets of paper. Then he explained that the topic of the assignment would be spear techniques. Alicia commented that Korin would do well, but he himself wondered why that would be the case. In his past life, his specialty had been boxing. Fermac, in turn, was a boxer who used a wide variety of ranges and footwork, in addition to his specialty in shadow. He was a rank 1 knight from the Northern Vercute Academy, famous for the runic magic engraved on his gauntlets, but now he was teaching spear classes. Korin was certain that the bastard had noticed something. He saw that Fermac was staring directly at him as if trying to test him. Fermac explained that the assignment would also involve choosing and researching a specific type of spear within each group. The students would have time to demonstrate different techniques for using the weapon. One student asked whether this would not favor those who already use spears, but Fermac replied that he would take that into account in the evaluation, adjusting the criteria and offering bonus points. Each group would consist of 4 members, and the participants would be selected randomly. Korin thought that group work was sold as a way to encourage and evaluate student cooperation, but in practice, almost always one person did all the work while the others did not care. He had gone through this countless times in his first life, working in groups with people who had no idea what they were doing, with those who only wanted an easy grade, or with those who always made excuses, such as saying their grandfather had died, even though that grandfather had already died dozens of times. He had lived through this for 4 years as a physical education student in college and another 3 years at the academy. This time, however, it would be different. He was with Yeager Hinchpeter, a 3rd rank knight with elite physical abilities, good judgment, and the ability to follow orders. Alicia did not even need to be mentioned, an incredibly powerful swordsmanship prodigy. The last member was Frieren. Despite her somewhat rough attitude, she was quite dedicated. Since everyone in the group was strong and hardworking, Korin felt that he could finally say goodbye to the frustrating experiences of the past. He thought about telling the others that he had made a reservation in the training room for 3 hours later, but that remained only in his mind. Yeager asked whether they had been using that room for about 2 months, and Korin confirmed it. Then, Yeager asked whether the walls and floor were made of high-density material, to which Korin replied that they were, and that they were extremely expensive. Yeager then asked why the room was in that condition, since everything was completely destroyed. That had been caused by Frieren, who had devastated the place with a single punch against Alicia. To Korin, she was simply a psychopath. Korin had asked Frieren to go easy during training against Alicia, since the goal was to work specifically on spear skills. However, one only had to look at the state of the room to understand that this had not happened. Frieren destroyed everything, and did not seem to care at all. Because of that, the group ended up being expelled from the training room. On Sunday, everyone was at the church. Korin said that it was time to reflect a little on the group assignment and asked everyone to share their thoughts. Alicia apologized for what had happened the previous day, explaining that she could not control her own power very well. Korin replied that she had done well, and that all the time they had spent training together had been worth it. Alicia said that his spear skill was perfect, and that she had only been able to learn because of that, but Korin disagreed, saying that she learned because she had excellent eyes. Yeager commented that he still did not feel completely confident wielding such a long weapon. Even though he knew the technique called Return to the Heavens, he was still struggling to understand how to execute everything properly. Korin said that, in fact, he was doing very well. He then turned his attention to Hwoarang and asked how she was feeling. She answered simply, saying that she wanted to eat. At that moment, she was receiving communion, eating the wafers and drinking the wine. Korin knew that the Korean game he was inside had a strong influence from the world he came from, including Earth's religions. Hwoarang was dealing with what they called holy blood and flesh, something considered a mandatory weekend duty. Korin asked if she was acting as a nun among the Protestants, but she explained that it was not by her own will. Even so, he commented that she should still read the scriptures because there was still much to learn from those called saints. He reflected that, although the Catholic Church held ancient views, Protestant teachings often spoke of the same things, such as love, loving oneself, and loving one's neighbor. Alicia commented that this was a wonderful teaching. Then Corin asked Frieren if she knew the origin of the failure of the previous training. She replied that everyone was weak, and that even when she used little strength, they broke. To her, the weak would remain weak, and the strong would remain strong. Corin said that she was not completely wrong, but that this was an opinion only the truly strong could express. He then proposed a bet. If, within 1 minute, he could make her kneel, she would pay for dinner. Frieren accepted, stating that if she won, she would not even need a reward, because she knew she would end up hurting someone. Later, they were in a more open field. Corin said that the start would be given by Yeager's signal, who was completely terrified, not understanding how they had ended up in that situation. Even so, he gave the signal. Corin advanced immediately, determined to use his secret arts from the very beginning. He even used the crawling serpent strike, but Frieren defended as if it were nothing. When Corin tried to advance with the second step, his training spear ended up breaking. Frieren observed that she had empty hands and unarmed fists. Corin commented that she really had a talent for destroying things. The two began exchanging blows using the 8 trigram steps. Corin managed to evade all the attacks and realized that she was not landing a single hit. Frieren called him irritating and warned him that he should keep dodging if he did not want to die. The next attack was a direct punch. Corin thought that if he were hit, he would be hospitalized for at least a month. Following his instinct, he tried to block using the 8 trigrams chains. The impact was heavy, but he managed to block it. Frieren barely realized what had happened and in the next instant was on her knees. Yeager and Alicia could not understand how that had happened. Corin simply commented that she had knelt. Frieren wanted to try again, but Corin refused, stating that he had already won and that there was no reason to fight again. She insisted on a rematch, but Corin provoked her, saying that he could hear her body trembling with irritation. A few days later, Corin successfully contained the revolt of the group members. He believed that now he could gradually teach everyone to master the spear and prepare them for the presentation. However, Frieren handed over a letter saying that she was sick. Corin knew that this was a lie. As the problem solver and leader of the assignment, he decided to use his secret weapon. He prepared a banquet. Frieren tried to refuse, but it was obvious that her mouth was watering. Corin asked if she really thought she could refuse. She stated that she was no longer sick and lunged eagerly at the fish. Then Corin commented on how long chefs spent working to prepare a single dish. Frieren commented that it had not taken even half an hour, but Corin disagreed. He explained that, in truth, it had been 10 years. From finding good ingredients, learning how to handle them, and preparing everything correctly, most cooks take about 10 years before they can truly present their cuisine to customers. Frieren asked where he was going with that explanation. Corin then explained that it had taken him 3 years to become good enough at martial arts to make her kneel. Her favorite fish and martial arts had many similarities. Everything began with the correct choice of ingredients, moved on to careful preparation, and reached the stance taken before attacking. Everything depended on small details. He asked whether, after that, they were already reconciled. As an answer, Frieren simply threw a notebook at his face. In it were written spear positions and basic principles. Corin immediately realized that she had done all the necessary research and thought that this was something a good girl would do. Alicia and Yeager were also training the spear with dedication. Thanks to Frieren, there was no longer any concern about the theoretical part. They already had enough material for the presentation. As time passed, mid-May arrived, the first week of group presentations. The order of the presentations was sequential, and the group before them would go first. The leader of that group was Pales, who announced that the theme presented would be the 5-star spear. The presentation went without major problems. Fermac commented that it had not been bad, but warned that from that moment on, he would break through their formation. Then, the former first-ranked knight of the Kingdom of Elas, a graduate of the Northern Vercute Guardians Academy, Fermac Diamant, would face the students directly. He said that if the group could endure 10 seconds, they would receive the maximum grade. Then he ordered them to block his attack. The students were not prepared for that. Fermac advanced using a boxing stance and, in less than 1 second, knocked down the entire group. Yeager commented in amazement at his speed. Corin realized that the professor was not holding back. Fermac assessed that, despite the lack of practice, the choice of a group spear technique had been good. The grade was B, no one complained, since everyone was lying on the ground. The second group chose the technique called Northern Mortal Spear, 9 mortal dragons, but Fermac defeated them all again. The grade was C-. Then it was the turn of the third group, Corin's group. He was excited to present. The chosen theme was the Lanaja technique, the 8 trigrams of the spear. Fermac commented that the choice was interesting and told them to begin the demonstration. Yeager started by dodging the attacks. Alicia pushed the opponent's weapon downward. Frieren advanced and pierced the unprotected enemy. Corin observed and realized that the group had done an excellent job. Fermac praised the presentation, saying that they had removed all redundancy and that, despite the simplicity, the principles were excellent. Korn prepared to tell the rest of the group to continue, but Firmak interrupted. He said that it would not be necessary because only the leader, Korn, would be enough. The fight would be only between the two of them. Korn understood at that moment that this had always been the professor's plan, but he raised no objections. Firmak advanced using the jet thrust lightning technique. Korn knew that in boxing, the fighter adopts a specific stance before throwing a hook. Normally, in that situation, the opponent should block on the right side. However, Firmak's body was not moving from the right foot, and Korn knew very well that he was left-handed. Because of that, he blocked using the second step of the spear. Firmak himself was shocked at having been blocked. The students commented on the absurd speed of the confrontation. The professor increased the pace even more, but Korean continued to block all the attacks. Even though he was only rank C, Firmak realized that Korn had already surpassed the level of a simple student, so he decided to show everything he had, not just the basics. He wanted Korn to also set aside the basics and show the serpent technique. Firmak's next strike was devastating. Even so, Korn remained still and did not make a single move to block. The professor asked why Korn had not moved. Korn replied that 10 seconds had already passed. Up to that moment, the professor had used only his right arm to appear right-handed, but the response to the final attack had been a block from the left side. Firmak then explained to Group 3 that when it came to secret arts, many chose elaborate techniques blindly, but that basic principles were, in fact, the true secret arts. He then announced that Group 3 would receive extra points and take the maximum grade. The students were extremely emotional about the result. After that, Firmak called Karenin aside for a private conversation and asked him not to feel pressured, since it would only be a casual talk. Later, already in the professor's office, Firmak asked whether Korn was really just a 5th-ranked student. Korn replied that he was, at least officially. The professor stated that he should be aware that his abilities did not match those of a 5th-ranked knight. Korn reflected that he could neither capture nor sense spirits because of his runic oath. Because of that, he could barely capture a 5th-rank evil ghost, which prevented him from advancing in rank. Firmak explained that the professors of the Knight faculty had recently gathered to discuss his case. The conclusion was that Korn needed to be re-evaluated. He would receive several missions, and based on them, his rank would be reviewed. The maximum rank allowed in this re-evaluation would be semi-first rank. According to the professor, the results Korn had shown were good, even though they had been achieved through unconventional means. Korn thought that ranking up in that way was not a bad thing, since the pay would increase. With a better rank, he would also be able to choose higher-level missions. If this were really inside a game, that kind of privilege would only come after the 2nd year. Because of that, he accepted the re-evaluation and asked what he would need to do. Firmak explained that there would be 2 missions carried out alone, involving monsters and evil spirits of semi-first rank. At the moment, there were 4 missions of that level available at the Guardians Association, 2 involving monsters and 2 involving spirits. Korn realized that, in the end, they were asking him to capture 1 monster and 1 spirit, and that he still needed to choose immediately. Firmak asked him to decide on the spot. Korn felt a little tense, but accepted. Shortly afterward, he was already departing for the mission. He was accompanied by the instructor Haman, who commented that it was not so bad. In his youth, he used to venture into the mist to find monster nests. Korn admitted that the path would not be so boring if he kept telling stories. Haman said he could tell a few, but soon explained what the first hunt would be. The target would be a semi-first-rank monster located in the mountains, a 2-headed ogre. It was slow, but extremely dangerous. Korn asked whether 2-headed ogres were not normally first-rank monsters, since he had been re-evaluated only to semi-first rank. Haman explained that, in this case, the ogre was still a juvenile and had not reached adulthood, which justified the lower classification. In addition, according to the reports, it was raising some hunting dogs. Korn concluded that a frontal attack was out of the question. Haman commented that Guardians did not rely only on brute strength, and that this mission would serve to evaluate everything about him. Later, they arrived at the western mountains of the city, where the cave inhabited by the juvenile 2-headed ogre was located. Neither Haman nor the association staff, who were there only as a precaution, would help directly. Korn would have to handle everything on his own, and they would only intervene in case of an emergency. Haman asked Korn to report the results of his analysis of the area. Korn explained that, judging by the footprints around, there were signs that the ogre and the hunting dogs were moving together. He estimated the presence of 3 dogs. Haman observed that there were only tracks of 2 4-legged animals following the ogre. Korn then explained that one of them appeared to be a female and was probably pregnant. There were signs of a beast being dragged, which indicated that the prey had not been consumed on the spot. Neither ogres nor hunting dogs usually saved food, but that behavior changed when there were offspring involved. Haman said that the analysis had been impressive. Next, he asked how Korn planned to hunt a semi-first-rank monster. Korn replied that the first step would be to separate the ogre from the hunting dogs, since they were beasts guided by instinct. To do that, he would use what had been given to humanity since the earliest times, the strongest weapon of all, reasoning. Even if humans expanded their influence and sailed across the world, there would always be threats lurking. Demonic beings continued to impose their presence in that world. That forest had a clear owner, the two-headed ogre. It was a territory where few humans dared to set foot. That was his kingdom. The first to notice that something was wrong were the forest guards, the hunting dogs. They realized that the female of the group had disappeared. She was the one who was about to give birth and could barely move. That could only mean one thing. There was an intruder. The intruder had taken the female. When the information reached the great king of the forest, a roar of fury echoed with such force that it made the entire region tremble. The ogre Two Heads, twisted by rage, declared that the female had to be rescued. The great hunting dogs departed immediately, following the scent of the kidnapped female, while the ogre advanced right behind them. Within that kingdom, nothing usually stopped them. The tracking ended in a clearing. The female was found tied at the center of the area. She rubbed her snout against her companion, trying to confirm that he was all right. The moment they tried to free her, the trap was activated. Giant logs fell from above, completely crushing the beasts. In a few moments, almost all of the hunting dogs were killed. The last survivor realized too late that they were no longer hunting the intruder. It was the opposite. While he tried to catch his breath, a new trap was activated. Runic stones exploded, releasing destructive energy. That was something only one race could create, the malevolence of a human. The remaining beasts were burned to ash. Seeing his loyal subordinates reduced to cinders, the ogre entered absolute fury. The trap also turned against him, but that was not enough to injure the king of the forest. Even so, he did not realize that the hunt was only beginning. The ogre was also a natural hunter. One of his heads possessed keen vision. The other had an exceptional sense of smell. Together, they worked to avenge the hunting dogs. Following the tracks was not difficult. There were so many signs that it was absurd. The enemy did not even try to hide his own scent. Even so, on the first day, the prey was not found. The tracks were there, but even with constant pursuit, it always escaped. Even when it seemed to be one step away from capture, the target vanished. When he camped that night after trying to contain his frustration, the ogre was ambushed. A Hagelar's rune was activated. The attack would have been fatal if not for the attention of the second head. Even so, shards of hail grazed him. Nothing significant. Soon after, new attacks began. Whenever he tried to sleep, hailstones fell on his head. The ogre began to ignore it, believing it did not represent a real threat. Then flaming stones appeared, setting part of the forest on fire and burning his body. Even as dawn approached and chaos spread, the prey continued to leave only ambiguous traces. 3 days passed like that. That was when the ogre finally realized the truth. He was not the hunter. He was the prey. Grief and fury accumulated within him until the source of everything appeared before his eyes. Corrin emerged and made it clear that he was tired of that pursuit. The ogre charged immediately, consumed by rage. Corrin responded with a leap, attacking from the air with his spear. The ogre believed he would not be able to dodge in midair and tried to split him in half with his club. At that moment, Corrin used the pagoda tree mountain throw together with the technique of the 2 unnecessary strikes. The impact was devastating. The blow completely tore off the right arm of the two-headed ogre. Even unarmed, Corrin advanced and executed the 8 trigram strike, the primordial chaos palm. The impact was so violent that it destroyed the monster's internal organs, reducing them to a deformed mass. The tyrant of the forest met his end as prey to a human. After the battle, Corrin explained that after filling his aura core, he had finally managed to use all the necessary power. The ogre had been defeated. Even so, his concern was now with Marott. The narrative then returns 3 days back in time. Marott was once again feeding Corrin. He asked how far she trusted him and how far she would be willing to go by his side. Marott, surprised, even burst the blood bag she was carrying, not understanding what he meant. She admitted that she might have gone too far, but made it clear that she trusted him. Corrin then explained that he had a plan and that he needed her help. Starting the next day, she and Alicia would be part of it. Marott did not understand immediately and questioned why the other girl would also be included if she herself was essential to the plan. Later, Marott changed her clothes and took a bath to remove the blood. Despite being a veteran guardian and a special vampire with a turbulent youth, she was still just a young girl in the prime of her youth. The words chosen by Corrin, which could easily cause misunderstandings, were enough to make Mariott's heart tremble. Even so, she was not naive. She realized that Corrin always seemed to be one step ahead, planning and reacting even before something happened. This had already become clear both when he saved her and when he saved Alicia. She was not ungrateful for his efforts, quite the opposite. Even so, she began to wonder how much Corrin truly knew. However, because she was in love, she ended up becoming blind to these details and once again accepted the favors of her unrequited affection. The reason many mages wished to become professors at the academy was not only the incredible collection of Merkaba books, but also the enormous research building. That place housed extremely rare ingredients, things that many mages only dreamed of seeing one day. Among them were special monsters that could not be killed and could only be sealed. Later, the mage Dana and Fermac stood before a massive wild boar. Dana asked whether the professor had ever heard of the boar that devoured an entire iron mine, along with the veins that had been buried deep underground. Fermac asked whether that research was related to the alpha trait of the special entity. Dana confirmed and explained that she wanted to write a thesis on the influence of a special demonic tribe on low-rank entities. Fermac asked whether it was enough to engrave a rune on the special monster. Dana confirmed, and commented on how good it was to have him by her side, praising his intelligence. She also pointed out that nowadays it was rare to find someone who mastered runic magic. Fermac explained that this was because runic magic was considered a dead language and difficult to use in real battles, unless the user was a knight like him, with a large amount of mana. At that moment, a student approached, and Dana commented that, as Fermac well knew, there were other dangerous monsters within the academy. She had never imagined that a special vampire would volunteer to help with the experiment. That vampire was Marott. That was the meeting between the boss of the first act, Marott, and the boss of the second act, the king of the iron mine. The haunted house mission was considered simple and could be chosen during the second semester in the original game. However, to defeat the first-rank evil spirit that possessed the house, it was necessary to endure attacks from various household objects, find the magic circle hidden in the basement, and destroy it. The real difficulty of the mission far exceeded its simple appearance. Experienced players called that mission the challenge that proved who was a true specialist. Normally, Corinne could not sense spirits, but that time there was an exception. Just like in the case of Duke Sabancia, who had possessed Lark, a spiritual body that took control of the magical tools in the training room, that phenomenon was known as a poltergeist. When a spirit possessed a house or building, it began to exert physical force, making it impossible to ignore. Corin entered the haunted mansion and advanced while destroying everything in his path, since he knew all the mission patterns. He passed through the attacks as if they were nothing, while everyone watched. The entire house was already marked with several Kanaz runes. Upon leaving, he set the place on fire. In the end, the house was completely burned. Mission completed. He finished everything in just 30 seconds. For him, it was extremely easy. Instructor Haman commented that it was a magical dungeon that not even two rank 2 mages could complete. He did not understand how that had been possible, and even wondered why he was talking to himself. Corin thought that this had been the final strategy left behind by the legendary streamer who had dominated the world of broadcasts in Korea. The instructor approached and congratulated him. At that moment, Corin was officially recognized as a semi-spirit. After that, Heyman mentioned a nearby port city called Sar and suggested that they have dinner together at a restaurant he knew. Corin asked if it was a sushi restaurant, but in truth, he was more interested in the city itself. There was something specific he wanted to find there. That was the real reason he had chosen to carry out a hunt for evil spirits in that region. The two of them left together toward the restaurant. Out of the corner of his eye, Corin noticed that Duke Go was still following him. That was perfect. It was then explained that 88 years earlier, at the North Pole, on the Dingle Peninsula, despite the extreme cold, there were countless natural resources. Among the frozen mountains, there was a gigantic mine, so rich that some called it the Iron Mountain. The pioneer miners of the region, in search of iron or gold, witnessed something unbelievable. An enormous boar was devouring iron ore. The creature became known as the boar that devoured everything. The demonic boar of the Dingle Peninsula, the king of the Iron Mountain. That was the first record of its existence. At that moment, Alicia was running hurriedly through the corridors, completely late after oversleeping. As she ran, she thought that she could not be late under any circumstances. She needed to carry out exactly what Corin had asked. A few days earlier, Alicia had contacted the veteran Marott. She even asked whether the matter was truly important. In fact, the one who had requested her presence was Deoku. For that reason, she ended up accepting and went to the scheduled meeting. As soon as she arrived, Marott explained that Corinne had asked for everything to be explained this time. Before starting, however, she asked whether Alicia would like to try an elixir. Alicia drank it immediately and was very surprised. The taste was extremely good, reminiscent of homemade food. Marott showed relief upon hearing that, explaining that, besides being tasty, the elixir was safe, and that the toxin used was of good quality. After that, Alicia asked what exactly Corin wanted to be explained. Then Marott revealed the entire plan. The subject revolved around the king of the Iron Mountain. From that moment on, Alicia began rushing through all sectors, thinking that the demonic boar sealed in the testing unit could break free at any moment. Meanwhile, on the fourth underground floor of the testing unit, the mage Dana was talking with Marietta. Dana asked what differentiated common monsters from special monsters. Marietta explained that the main difference lay in strength and the ability to dominate. Dana agreed and explained that some demons emitted an energy different from the others. Theoretically, these beings were called alpha entities. Unlike the normal members of their race, they were stronger and capable of giving orders. These alpha entities could easily command monsters of the same species. However, this ability of domination did not work on different demons. In the case of special monsters, this limitation did not exist. Mariette added that special demons could command any demon weaker than themselves. Dana asked whether Mariette had ever experienced something similar. Mariette remembered when she fled to the hunting grounds, driven mad by thirst for blood. In that state, she had controlled monsters so that they would offer their own blood. Thinking about it more carefully, she concluded that it was not exactly domination. At that time, instead of controlling their minds, she had subdued them through fear. Dana then explained that there were three main types of demonic entities: monsters, evil spirits, and demi-humans. The influence of alpha traits varied among them. Marietta asked whether that meant it would be possible to easily command other demi-humans. Dana replied that more research would still be necessary, but she believed that, in general, no. The intellect of demi-humans was far greater than that of common monsters. Bringing the conversation to a close, Dana asked for the boars to be brought in. Soon, doctors and mages approached, pushing several cages, each containing a captured boar. Dana explained that the central point of the experiment was to test how far a monster alpha characteristics could go. If that power could be used freely, theoretically humanity would be able to control most monsters and evil spirits. Hearing this, Mariette realized that the experiment was far greater than she had imagined. Moreover, it was a topic that truly sparked her interest as a mage. If successful, humanity could proactively block many demonic dangers. Before proceeding, Dana asked whether Mariette had managed to make the elixir tasty. Mariette confirmed and said that thanks to a few adjustments, the final result had turned out excellent. Next, Dana asked Mariette to try to dominate one of the boars. When the cages were opened, Mariette released her power and gave clear orders. The boars were to approach, stop in front of her, and lie down. However, the result was completely unexpected. One of the boars collapsed on its side. Another began to spin uncontrollably, as if it were dancing. A third even lay down, but started rubbing itself against the ground in a strange way. Confused, Mariette realized that something was wrong. She had ordered them to lie down properly. Dana concluded that there was a limit to communication between a demi-human and a common monster. Low-rank monsters did not possess enough intelligence to understand complex commands. Even so, this would serve to compare the difference in communication between beasts of the same species. Next, Dana ordered Fermac to release the seal of the King of the Iron Mountain. Fermac began by using the banishment rune and released only the first seal. Even so, the creature roared ferociously, broke part of the chains, and released an absurd amount of power. The influence was immediate. All the boars became aggressive and began to move under the king command, turning their hostility even against Mariette. The boars did not obey, and Mariette had to retaliate using her own power to contain them. Dana was unsure whether that had happened because of the limitations of control or simply because they were all boars. Mariette stated that fortunately she could still restrain them with ease. Before the situation could stabilize, a new emergency occurred. The monster from cage A107 escaped suddenly, destroying everything around it. The creature was a manticore, which charged directly at Mariette. She defended herself using her blood lances, but the manticore dodged every attack. At that moment, Fermac told her to conserve her strength. Then he struck the creature with an extremely powerful punch and finished it with a direct blow that destroyed it completely. Soon after, Fermac informed Professor Dana that something was very wrong. It was not just the manticore. Several other monsters began to escape at the same time. One of the doctors warned Dana that everyone needed to evacuate immediately, but Dana ordered the activation of the large-scale monster resistance circle. Even if some research funds were lost, the priority was to handle the situation safely. A doctor from Group 2 reported that the magic circles were not activating. The group responsible for sealing confirmed the same problem. Someone had destroyed the magical sealing circles. Then the worst possibility became reality. The great creature, the King of the Iron Mountain, broke free. Meanwhile, in the port city of Sar, Korin was sitting in front of a large seafood banquet. The reason for being there was not just to eat. He was celebrating his promotion to semi-spirit rank together with Haman. Korin suggested ordering a bottle of suju, but Haman reminded him that he was still a third-year student and legally underage. In that mixed world of modernity and medieval age, he simply could not drink alcohol. To Korin, that was comparable to the sadness of not being able to eat fried chicken with soda in modern times. Even so, he commented that in the East, there was a saying that alcohol was something learned with adults, and that he wished Haman would be that adult. The instructor moved, ended up agreeing to have just one drink. Korin already had his glass prepared, thinking that the old man had fallen for it, when he was interrupted by a sudden sound. A dog bark echoed beside him. It was Deoku, barking very close to his ear. Korin thought that it was a bad omen, since it would be his first drink in years. The bark coincided exactly with the moment the king of the Iron Mountain broke free. Back at the testing unit, Fermac immediately asked Marott for help. She tried to use her ice crystal lance, but in the middle of the casting, the weapon shattered before the attack was even released. Marott believed that this had been caused by the absurd pressure of the boar power. Fermac commented that it was a shame, but still praised her effort. Then he advanced. His first strike caused absolutely no damage to the boar, which did not even seem to feel the impact. Soon after, the creature counterattacked using a lightning rune. Fermac even wondered how a monster could use a rune, but he was struck directly in the chest by the thunder. Dana reported that one of the walls had been destroyed and that the barrier system was about to fail. It had become a total emergency. All the monsters sealed in the cages began to escape at the same time. The Veronica code was activated. All staff needed to evacuate immediately. The security team received orders to activate all available magic circles and mobilize the spiritual golems. The golems, armored creatures created to face monsters, formed the last line of defense to ensure the escape of the others. Even so, unimaginable beasts were set free. A rank 1 venomous dragon, the rank 1 king Hyrant, and an army of demonic beasts advanced without control. Dana stated that if those creatures escaped the academy, the situation would become catastrophic. She authorized consecutive lightning strikes. The turrets began firing beams at the monsters, but some of them did not even react. One of the creatures advanced directly toward Dana, who was saved at the last moment by Dron Warski, who commented that he was just making a technical visit. He fired his magic swords, eliminating several creatures. When another tried to spit fire at him, it was interrupted by someone who had the ability to gather scrap and create golems. Crenell used the remains of the destroyed golems to form a new scrap golem. He commented, satisfied, that he could control them as well. The techniques that Man had taught really worked. A few days earlier, Korin had explained that stamina and physical strength were also essential for golem magic. After that, he physically trained Crenell and taught him some techniques. Now the result was clear. The method really worked. Even so, the scrap golem ended up being struck by extremely sharp claws and was damaged. Still, Crenell continued fighting because the druid Yahello appeared to support him with her roots. Wood mixed with metal parts, forming a hybrid golem of wood and scrap. Seeing that, Crenell wondered how Korin always seemed to know in advance what was going to happen. That was exactly why he had taught him that method as well. At that moment, the venomous dragon was about to reach the third underground floor. Before that happened, Alicia appeared and intercepted it, turning the confrontation into something fast and precise. As if she were preparing venomous dragon sushi, Dana realized that she had arrived at the perfect moment, and thought it was impressive how all the students who had appeared there possessed at minimum rank 1. Even surprised, Dana asked why so many students had come to that place at the same time. The answer was unanimous. Everyone said it was just a technical visit. At that exact moment, the plan of a boy who was not even present at the academy continued to be executed flawlessly. As a last resort, Marott activated her blood realm. A powerful barrier formed, trapping the Iron Mountain King once again. Not only did blood wrap around him, but also ice spikes that pierced the creature's body. After completely impaling the monster and leaving the doctors terrified, Marott warned everyone not to lower their guard. That creature was special, just as had been seen before. King Heron, unlike a simple demonic beast, was a high-rank monster, something that would easily appear in monster movies. He advanced, destroying everything around him. Dron Warski noticed the chaos and warned that the creature was breaking everything, demanding that someone do something immediately. Crenell asked for Yahello's support again. The golem advanced using spiritual power combined with her druidic magic, trapping the monster among roots and resilient plants. Then Crenell explained that the plan was to detonate all 5 spiritual bombs absorbed by the golem. The duo Crenell and Yahello was known in the game the heroic legend of Ahan, precisely for dealing with giant monsters with extreme efficiency. The golem activated all the necessary systems to use the weapon of nature. A massive wooden fist formed, equipped with spiritual bombs. Crenell, overwhelmed by intense energy, triggered the final mechanism and executed a powerful rocket elbow strike. The impact was devastating and completely eliminated the rank 1 monster. Meanwhile, Korin, in the port city of Sar, reflected on why he had chosen the haunted house mission specifically to reach that point. Beside him, Deokgu whimpered, extremely worried. Korin knew that he still had something important to do. Shortly after, he knocked on the door of a church. A nun answered, and Korin introduced himself as an academy student sent from abroad. He explained that he could not attend Mass due to his missions, but asked if he could pray in a reserved room. The nun allowed it without hesitation. Upon entering the prayer room, Korin confirmed that his memories were correct. On the table there was a signal device disguised as a cross. When he pressed a secret button, a portal opened. From within it emerged Professor Josephine, holding a knife to his neck and demanding to know how he knew about that signal. Korin, remaining calm, indicated that there were urgent matters that needed to be resolved before any explanation. Back at the test unit, the golem continued to decimate the remaining rank 1 creatures. Krenel maintained the offensive, confident. However, Alicia ended up getting distracted while observing the collapse around her. At that moment, the venomous dragon approached again, and she realized she would have to face it alone. She remembered what Marott had explained earlier. Korin had been clear. She should not use that under any circumstances. Domain rupture. Alicia understood that she needed to defeat that creature without resorting to that power. Korin could only have said that because he saw her potential and wanted her to train, but even so, the challenge was extreme. At that moment, she saw Mariette's blood barrier break completely. The blood realm collapsed. Marott fell to the ground, weak, unconscious, and covered in blood. Alicia realized that this had happened exactly as Korin had predicted. He had already said that Marott would probably not be able to defeat the demonic boar. The creature had transformed after consuming the oldest steel in the world, bearer of the original runes. Because of that, the King of the Iron Mountain possessed 100% resistance against physical and magical attacks. That was the reason countless heroes had been killed by the demonic boar. Even so, Marott got back up and did not give up, because Korin had asked her to do so. Alicia was distracted again and was almost struck by the venomous dragon, but she understood that she had no choice but to win as well. The mage Dana was still in complete despair and could do nothing but sigh at the scene before her. Marietta, one of the most powerful students, was directly facing the demonic boar, the king of the Steel Mountain, a legendary demonic monster, in a brutal confrontation against an elder rank vampire. She was clearly struggling, but she remained standing, which by itself was already an extraordinary feat. Professor Dana realized that she was witnessing a moment that would one day be recorded in history. When the boar charged once more, it pierced through all the ice attacks launched against it. Marott was forced to use the multiple shield of blood and snow, but even that defense ended up being destroyed. The students struggled with all their strength to prevent the demonic spheres from escaping the test unit, yet everyone felt that defeat was approaching. Mariotti was struck head-on by the creature, but when the monster itself realized it, she was no longer there. Duco had saved his master. Mariotti then realized that reinforcements had finally arrived. Meanwhile, Alicia suffered another attack from the venomous dragon and found herself cornered. She thought she would not be able to defeat that creature without a domain rupture and wondered what Korin would do in her place. When the monster tried to bite her again, Alicia dodged, focused, took a deep breath, and remembered the fundamentals. Just the basics: dodge and cut. Emptying her mind and using the ascent of the heavens of the Dosen sword, she sliced through the great serpent's scales from end to end. After being torn apart, the creature finally fell dead. Alicia realized that she had managed to defeat the monster without using domain rupture. Korin approached and acknowledged her good work. In fact, everyone had done well. Krenel confirmed that they had defeated the monster, but they still needed the warrior Luden. Yahello stated that the success had only been possible because of her. Korin asked for a situation report. Alicia explained that Mariotte was still blocking the attacks well, but needed help. Josephine asked what the plan would be from that point on. Korin Locke, who had been brought from the church, clearly had something in mind. He confirmed this and explained that he only needed a small amount of help to capture the demonic boar, although there were still many other monsters there. Korin's plan was to feed the monsters in the test unit with runic magic stones. After ingesting large quantities of these stones, he could snap his fingers and burn all the monsters from the inside out, using runic resonance. His silver spear made of runic stone had exactly that function. Taking advantage of the opening that was created, he advanced together with Alicia. Among the medium high-level monsters that survived the activation of the resonance, about 30 remained standing, including the special demonic boar. Even so, Korin stated that there was no reason to worry, and asked Dron to join him. Dron replied that his boss had finally returned. Korin also called for the so-called Dream Team to gather. All the great names of the heroic legend of Aran were gathered there, the heroes who would save that world. Mariotte was genuinely happy to see Korin again. The group leader declared that the time for the true offensive had come and that the counterattack began at that moment. Korin knew very well that this group was not only powerful, but also fluid and perfectly synchronized. Even so, confidence was not absolute, because the opponent was terrifying. The King of the Steel Mountain devastated everything in his path and never showed mercy at his peak. Mariotte ordered everyone to prepare. The boar charged with everything it had, using its horns, but Crenel showed no fear and tried to use the warrior Luden. Corrin interrupted, making it clear that they should not face it head-on. When the golem advanced impulsively with Crenel, it was pulverized by the headbutt of the King of the Iron Mountain. Confused, Crenel did not understand what had happened. Corrin explained that, at that point, Crenel should continue attacking the demonic boar, while the others spread out. Yell needed to make the plants grow and resist by any means. She used vines to bind the giant boar, but it activated its original runes and broke free as if it were nothing. At that point, it became clear how absurdly strong that creature was. Corrin then ordered Dron to flank the enemy with his magic swords. Dron thought that this was expected, since his employer was a natural strategist, always acting at the perfect moment. He used 2 blades, one of flames and the other of lightning, both reinforced with first-rank mana. Even so, the boar's original runes repelled the attacks as if they were insignificant. The boar had not been injured, not even slightly. Corrin then ordered Duke Go to advance. He landed a headbutt squarely on the King of the Iron Mountain, throwing the creature backward. Corrin explained that, to hit that monster, it was necessary to divide physical and magical attacks in a balanced way, as that was a very common pattern. The original runes, known as the 8 characters necessary to reach paradise, possessed a powerful but imperfect concept. The boar resisted physical attacks with its red fur and magical attacks with its blue fur. In addition, it still held a secret weapon, the golden fur. Corrin ordered the Dream Team to restrain it by any means possible, and that, if they lost control, they should grab it again. Dron and Elatar would stay at mid-range, while Corrin and Alicia would wait in the rear. Mariotti would need to follow his commands exactly, which would be the most difficult part of the entire plan. Corrin asked everyone to stop thinking about what came after and focus only on the present, putting everything they had into that battle, because only that way would they win. When the boar charged again, the golem dodged with a leap and grabbed the creature's head from above. The monster changed its fur to red and escaped the hold, but Dron took advantage to attack it with magic directed at the red fur. Corrin ordered them to repeat the same pattern as before. When the boar changed to blue fur, Duco landed a solid physical punch. Dron realized that the strategy was truly working, but suddenly the fur color changed again. It had only been a feint. The boar understood that kind of strategy and counterattacked using the rune of destructive light, hurling Duco away, severely injured. Corrin ordered Mariotte to release Warp and use the blood spears, but the boar reacted by switching back to blue fur. Even so, Corrin already had another plan in mind. He advanced while calling Smurf, Tin's mascot, and checked whether he could block the next attack. Then Corrin used the Pagoda Mountain Shot combined with the Mega Strike. The blow did not hit the boar directly, but destroyed the ground beneath it, creating a massive crater. Corrin acknowledged that the monster had excellent reflexes and asked Marietti to launch even more blood spears. If the boar used blue fur to block the spears, it would receive a physical attack from behind. If it used red fur, it would be struck by the spears from the front. Corrin analyzed the situation, trying to predict the enemy's reaction. The boar then laughed and revealed its final card, activating Absolute Tolerance, also known as the Indestructible Golden Fur. The Boar King began to mock everyone, displaying its secret ability, 5 limited minutes of total invulnerability. In that form, no one could face it head-on. The creature charged toward the team, and Corrin ordered everyone to flee immediately. Dron, however, warned that this was impossible, as there was nowhere left to run. All passages were blocked and the building was already in ruins. Corrin realized that the monster had done this on purpose, trapping its victims before the final attack. The golem still tried to react but was completely obliterated. The walls of blood and ice raised by the small human dem were also destroyed. That was the moment when the king would escape the prison where it had been confined for so long. Corrin recognized that form as the enemy's final phase, the golden fur, the 5-minute invulnerability pattern of the Act 2 final boss, a dreaded moment that had already driven many players to despair. Even so, he knew that there was a hidden method in that part of the game. Corrin asked Alicia to release her own seal. She possessed a skill with 100% physical and magical penetration, called Domain Rupture. The attack struck directly at the center of the demonic boar's snout. Corrin stated that this proved that a well-trained Alicia was worth more than an entire group. He declared that this was no longer the moment for the students, but for the professor to shine. Josephine once again created a great seal, chaining the boar and restoring the grand circle in a short time. Corrin knew that the golden fur was a powerful ability, but once it was broken, the monster would not be able to use the original runes for quite some time. Mariette prepared herself once more, creating a massive crystal of ice and blood. While Corrin and the rest of the group retreated, he asked the professor to block the final attack. Mariette focused everything she had and ended the battle once and for all, using the Crimson Spear. Thus, the nightmare from 80 years ago, the demon of the Dingle Peninsula, finally met its end. The creature's body was torn apart by the original light, revealing the original runes, the 8 characters required to reach paradise. This was an artifact from the sacred era that could not be destroyed by brute force, but whose vessel, the runic stone, could sometimes break. 88 years earlier, on the Jingle Peninsula, the boar had swallowed this runic stone, which ironically granted it an almost immortal power. Since then, no one had dared to retrieve it. Now the demon had been subdued, and the runic stone inside it shattered. The primordial rune did not disappear. It merely drifted aimlessly until it found the nearest runic stone, where it settled once again. The mission had been prepared over the course of 10 years. Fermac had infiltrated the academy and played the role of a professor solely for that moment. The Boar King, despite his terrifying fame, met a modest end after remaining sealed for 80 years, which explained his weakening. All that remained for Fermac was to leave the academy carrying the runic stone with him. Even so, someone stood in his way. The one who had faced Marott Dunalive defeated the great beast and directly interrupted Fermac's plans. That person was Corinne the Lock. Standing before him was Fermac, the martial nephew of the one who had once been his master. Corin had already perceived the connection. Fermac was the disciple of the disciple whom Corin's master had renounced, which technically made him Corin's martial uncle. At that moment, Corin realized that Fermac had finally understood who he was, even though it had taken time. When Corin used the spear technique inherited from Fermac's master, it became clear that the infiltrator's judgment had been correct. The 6-step spear handling technique required the title of martial master to be executed properly. When Fermac saw Corin using those techniques against Lunia Arden, he decided to test him, even while infiltrated on a secret mission. Even so, in that first moment, he made the most prudent decision and chose to ignore him. After the duel against Lunia Arden in the middle of the semester, Fermac used the pretext of a reclassification to send Corin out of the city. The plan was simple. He would complete his mission and flee the academy. What Fermac did not expect was that Corin would return. The events involving Dana's experiment and the incident with the veteran had been far too convenient, making it clear that Fermac was waiting for the right moment to act. Corin made it clear that Fermac would not be able to leave with the original rune. The professor replied that this was not information a mere student should possess. To Fermac, any spearman who mastered a technique he did not know and still blocked his path was a direct enemy. Because of that, he even activated his runic gauntlets to deal with Corin. Corin knew his opponent very well. Fermac Damon was publicly known as a famous rank 1 knight. More than that, he was the true mastermind behind the breaking of the seal of the boss at the end of Act 2, the one who in the future would appear alongside the King of Paradise as one of his 4 executives. His strength was comparable to that of Lunia Arden, classified as elite level. Fermac showed a certain disdain, stating that Corin was becoming arrogant after just a little action. Then he raised his shadow servant to end the confrontation quickly. This was his special ability, capable of duplicating attacks whenever shadows were available. It was no coincidence that Corin had chosen that location as the battlefield. The terrain was open and completely covered with sun runes. Corin explained that the natural enemy of the shadow type was the sun type, since shadow magic depended directly on the existence of darkness. As he advanced, Fermac realized that he was surrounded. Solar runes were carved across the entire ground beneath him. Corin revealed that it had been difficult to prepare. He spent 20 days carving sun runes across that terrain. It was laborious, but he had energy to spare. Corin had chosen a desolate location with little access and a secret passage. He had prepared for this confrontation before any other. It was a cruel counterattack, designed exclusively for Fermac. It was not luck, but pure preparation. Even so, Fermac acknowledged Corin's resilience and activated the lightning rune, advancing and closing the distance in a single second. Corin counterattacked with his spear, but struck only a shadow servant. Fermac used jet propulsion and nearly delivered a fatal blow, but Corin evaded using the 8 trigrams body movement. Even Fermac was impressed by that evasion. Corin then executed the Celestial Return, 4th step, with a full rotation. Fermac dodged while exchanging rapid blows with him, recognizing the impressive balance of Corin's techniques. For Fermac, pretending to be a professor for 10 years had become second nature. Even so, Corin made it clear that no matter what he tried, he would die there. Fermac, however, assessed the situation and decided not to end the battle at that moment. He stated that the next time they met, he would make sure to truly kill him. Corin knew that Fermac needed to flee the city urgently, since there were still those who believed he was dead. If he chose to escape, he would use spatial magic, something not even Josephine would be able to stop. Before Fermac activated the lightning rune again, Corin made it clear that this was a duel. Fermac, however, replied that he had no obligation to accept a duel he considered insignificant. Corin told Fermac to stop pretending. He stated that he knew very well that Fermac carried a commandment, a high-risk method capable of granting immense power, depending on the conditions. The method Corin used was the same as that of the great warriors of the Paradise of Shadows, the commandments. Fermac's commandment was clear. He could not refuse a duel. Firmak immediately understood and asked if that was why Corrin had come alone. Corrin confirmed it. A duel had to be one-on-one. The limitation of the commandment was absolute. While the duel rune was active, Firmak could neither flee nor receive help. He was forced to remain there. Following the sacred rule, both introduced themselves. Firmak Damon revealed his name as a warrior of paradise. Tates Baltazar, Firmak Daman. Corrin introduced himself as the Spear of Paradise, Aaron Danwa, Corrin Loch. According to the ancient laws, names were revealed before combat, because there was only one possible conclusion. It was a duel to the death. At that moment, the system backup was activated. There was a complete review of Corrin's commandments. The first commandment of duty stated that he would not close his eyes to the misfortune of good people. The second commandment of restriction determined his inability to perceive spirits. The third commandment of oath declared that he would save this world. The system confirmed total relevance and granted 100% status ascension. Corrin received a total increase in warrior regeneration persistence, along with pain tolerance and domain comprehension. His aura core advanced to the intermediate level, accumulating 3,500 units. The oath was clear. He had to stop Firmak and save the world. The duel began as a classic confrontation between a spearman and a fist fighter, a battle of distance versus approach. Firmak tried to close the gap at all costs to land his blows. Corrin did everything possible to maintain distance, blocking and counterattacking with countless thrusts of the Radiant Serpent. A good spearman never allows the enemy to get close. A fist fighter, on the other hand, never misses the chance to attack the moment the spear is withdrawn. When Corrin finished a sequence of attacks, Firmak charged forward with everything he had. This was already within Corrin's calculations. Corrin evaded by using the spear as if it were a vaulting pole, launching his own body into the air. Jumping in close range, combat normally increases vulnerability, since the attack would come at the moment of landing. However, Corrin attacked while still in the air, using the Spear of Chaos. Firmak barely managed to block and realized just how fast that opponent was. Corrin had executed 7 consecutive attacks between the jump and the landing. In response to this, Firmak changed his strategy. He activated the lightning rune at the exact moment Corrin became still, preparing the return of the heavens. By the second step of the technique, Firmak already had his fist armed and struck Corrin head-on, displacing his face and making him spit blood. That was only the beginning. Firmak launched a brutal combo, landing countless consecutive punches. The next attack, a true rain of meteors, would have been enough to bring Corrin down. He knew it. In a fraction of a second, his eyes followed Firmak's fists. Something was wrong. Firmak did not intend to strike. His hand was open. He grabbed Corrin's spear, drew a lightning rune, and hurled it away, pinning it into a tree. Firmak asked what he would do now. A spearman without a spear. The next blow was blocked by Corrin's arms, but the impact sent him flying. Pain surged through his body. He tried to activate the return rune, but the spear was stuck with such force that it did not respond to the call. Firmak advanced again, starting another combo of rapid punches. Even so, Corrin declared that regardless of the weapon, he was still a martial artist. He activated the ignited palms of the 8 trigrams, landing several direct blows to Firmak's chest. Then he used the piercing palm, striking directly at the heart. Firmak admitted he was almost surprised. However, he stated that Corrin's boxing could not compare to his skill with the spear. He remained unharmed after the blows and answered with a devastating punch to the liver, followed by a left hook. From that moment on, Corrin began to be overwhelmed. His body was crushed by Firmak's consecutive strikes, as Firmak pressed forward without giving him any room to react. He had already lost the will to fight. Even so, before Firmak could finish the fight with a straight punch to Corrin's stomach, the spear returned at the last instant and blocked the attack. Corrin declared that he acknowledged Firmak as a difficult opponent, keeping a smile on his face. Firmak had not noticed, but his own blows had pushed Corrin exactly into the position where the spear was embedded. That opened a decisive opening. Corrin activated the intent of the Crawling Calamity Serpent and advanced with a precise thrust. The spear pierced Firmak, making him bleed heavily and fall to the ground. Even so, he managed to stand up at the last moment and admitted that it had been impressive. According to him, Corrin had reacted perfectly at the moment physical attacks ceased to work. Each response had been chosen at the exact timing, and once again Firmak found himself at a disadvantage. Corrin remarked that Firmak was acting like a professor again and asked him to stop that. Firmak agreed and stated that he needed to end everything right then. Next, he inscribed 3 runes with his own blood directly onto his skin: Tawaz, Otala, and Ingwas. That invoked a world where the sun did not exist. The Shadow Paradise, the Citadel of Darkness, manifested and swallowed all the surrounding light. Firmak's 3rd commandment was the oath to serve the darkness. He admitted that Corrin had been clever to use sun runes to contain the darkness, but explained that after the full invocation, those shadows could no longer be dispelled. That was the paradise of the Shadow Warriors. Firmak summoned not only shadow copies of himself, but a true army of shadows, promising to kill Corrin using only his fists. Korin pointed out that the duel was no longer a one-on-one confrontation. At that instant, Firmak realized he had made a grave mistake. Korin stated that he knew Firmak would use that card if he were pressured. Then he took out a golden mandragora and activated it. The plant's scream echoed with an intensity 7 times greater than that of a common mandragora and could not be blocked by any magical ability. The sound dissipated the shadows, burst Firmak's eardrums, and Korin's as well, although he showed little concern for the pain. Korin declared that Firmak would die there, the demonic beast had already been defeated, and the mandragora would continue screaming. Korin possessed pain tolerance and could endure it for a long time, while Firmak, wounded, would not have the same endurance. Desperate, Firmak summoned 12 shadow servants, claiming that within the Fortress of Shadows, the chances of defeating him were null. Even with the mandragora hanging against his body, Korin advanced and destroyed the servants one by one, cutting them down with his spear. He did not expect, however, the direct attack from Firmak, who used jet propulsion and hurled him against one of the walls of the Shadow Empire. Firmak tried to chain another combo of blows. Korin realized that he could not continue like that. He tore off his own shirt, revealing a body covered in numerous sound runes engraved directly into his skin. That was not showmanship, it was preparation. Korin declared that this would be a fair fight, 1 against 1, without tricks. Firmak believed that the Shadow Servants would not be able to harm Korin in that state, but he realized too late that it was practically suicide. Korin's body began to enter controlled combustion. Taking advantage of the moment, he pushed the enemy back with rapid strikes of the serpent and demanded that Firmak stop conserving energy. The fight had to go on to the end, with pure strength alone. Instinctively, Firmak felt that the young man before him was his natural enemy. He decided to risk his own life and activated the 6th step, Sa, an ability that burned the aura core in exchange for power and speed, the supreme technique of the great warriors of the Paradise of Shadows. Korin, with his body in flames, responded by activating the 6th step of the spear, Sura. Both advanced at the same time. When the spear collided with Firmak's fist, neither of them felt pain. Firmak landed a direct blow to Korin's face, which Korin ignored, responding by cutting into the enemy's body like a maniac. The next strike of the spear tore off Firmak's arm. They continued exchanging attacks until only blood remained on the battlefield. In the end, the spearman remained standing. The fistfighter fell to his knees, his chest pierced by the runic spear. Before dying, Firmak admitted that it had been incredible. Exhausted and on the brink of death, Korin acknowledged that he had won. If he closed his eyes at that moment, Korin could hear the screams of the past, people begging for his help. In the other timeline, when he faced Firmak again after losing to him, both were trapped in the realm of nightmares. Innocent people died in that massacre, and Korin lost friends and allies. Firmak, one of the 4 celestial kings, tried to bring hell into this world as a confidant of Tates Baltazar. This time, the outcome was different. Korin killed him. He realized that Firmak did not carry one of the secret treasures of the 4 kings, but he still possessed the original rune. Korin recovered it. Tates Baltazar had been gathering the 8 original runes to bring the Shadow Paradise back into the world, but now that would not be possible. Korin was in possession of the original rune O. For that reason, Tates Baltazar would not be able to complete the ritual. Korin had sworn to save that world. Looking at the rune in his hands, he wondered whether it was really worth so many deaths, so much hatred and resentment against existence. For the first time, he felt that he was beginning to understand the true weight of that oath. Anger was leading Korin down the wrong path. After everything, he was finally able to rest. His body fell with arms spread wide, completely bloodied and covered in wounds. He had done something insane. His left eardrum was ruptured. He had trusted his own regeneration, but the sun rune burned the upper part of his torso, both outside and inside. The pain was bearable for him. The real problem was the injuries caused by Firmak. His liver was pierced. His right clavicle was fractured. When the blow hit the sternum, the bones were crushed and the internal organs twisted. He was not well at all. He could barely move the left side of his body. He believed he had grown accustomed to pain, but in the end, he lost consciousness as the system delivered his rewards. In truth, it was the subsystem, since he was a subjugator. Korin had defeated Firmak Daemon. The rewards of the commandments were distributed. The first commandment, not closing one's eyes to the misfortune of others. Difficulty A granted 60 points distributed equally, since he had defeated a great evil. In addition, he received an extra reward, a map of the 4 secret treasures, Saul and Phineas. Later, Alicia was carrying Korin. Korin asked about the cleanup of the area, and Alicia explained that Professor Dana was taking care of it. She seemed irritated. Even so, the drone left. Yahello and the others were responsible for finding Korin lying on the ground in terrible condition. The drone knew no loyalty. It was merely a mercenary and made it clear that one should not expect much from it, since the relationship was purely professional. The rune and the golden mandragora had worked. Korin found that strange and asked how she knew he would question it. She answered casually, saying that she was not even that clever, and returned the question. After that, Corrin was lying down with his head resting on her lap and thanked her for saving him. He acknowledged that without her help in breaking the domain, they would not have defeated the Iron Mountain King. Thinking about it more carefully, he realized that he had been preparing for that fight long before it happened. During the group assignments and the cultivation of mandragoras, he had already been drawing runes everywhere. All of that was preparation. Corrin confirmed this when she asked why he had fought alone. He believed it was better when fewer people got hurt. She replied that even so, it was fine, and said that he had been incredible. Later, Yeager and Lark went to visit Corrin, who was covered in injuries and had broken ribs. They brought several snacks, but when they arrived, they found the room completely full of women. Corrin greeted them cheerfully and even asked if they had brought food. That made the two of them extremely irritated. Even so, they stayed in the room to visit their friend, although they were consumed by jealousy as they watched several girls feeding Corrin by hand. One of them commented that it was not often that everyone gathered there and suggested a game to pass the time. Marott agreed and even suggested inviting Corrin's friends to join. Yeager said he had never felt so happy in his life and that he would never criticize his friend again. Lark agreed enthusiastically. At that moment, someone knocked on the door. It was Professor Josephine, accompanied by the director. He asked directly how the student, Corrin, was feeling. Corrin realized that it was already time to begin revealing his hidden cards to the professors. Shortly after, he was left alone with the director and Josephine. The director apologized for asking his friends to leave the room, explaining that they needed to deal with confidential matters. He had many questions. The recent events could not be ignored, nor could the incident involving Luna Marott. Corrin stated that Professor Fermac was a spy. The director replied that he understood the weight of that claim. Corrin noticed that they did not seem surprised, as expected. They had probably reached the same conclusion after seeing the precept on Fermac's body. Even so, there was a truth that not even they had discovered, related to Tate's Baltazar. Corrin explained that Fermac was a disciple of that person. Josephine argued that this was impossible, since 80 years had passed. Corrin insisted that everything matched. The three-step spear, infinity, and the precept were the same abilities that had been taught to him. He was direct in stating that Fermac used exactly the same techniques. Josephine asked whether Corrin was also a disciple of Baltazar. He replied that there was no reason to distrust him, and that he was not there to demand immediate action. He was merely informing them of the facts. Furthermore, the body present there was only a facade. The director's true body remained in the castle, unable to leave. Corrin stated that Baltazar's disciple was alive, had become extremely powerful, and represented a danger. All of this was a consequence of the director's hesitation 80 years earlier. The primordial rune had been fragmented and scattered across the world after the betrayal of the disciple he trusted. Only 2 fragments had been recovered so far. Holding the rune, Corrin declared that they were probably in possession of one of the 4 secret treasures. If the coronation were to take place, Baltazar would no longer be considered a usurper. The consequences of that were obvious. He made it clear that the director was capable of imagining exactly what would happen next, Manhwa. Josephine was deeply shocked to realize that Corrin knew all of this. The reason why she, even after 80 years of service, had never become president of the Academy was simple. The position had always been occupied by a rising star chosen to assume the role. History made this clear. 80 years ago, Frieren was the president of the Academy. 50 years ago, Wade took over the position. Currently, the president was Kassar. The truth was even more disturbing. All of them were puppets created from runes, with the function of monitoring the world. All of them had been made by a single person, Aaron Manhwa. Faced with this, the director asked what Corrin intended to do with this information. Corrin replied that they both shared the same objective. Then he revealed his 3 commandments, the precepts marked into his own flesh. He stated that he would be honored to become the first spear of Aaron. Next, he knelt before the director and declared that he wanted to protect and save that world. He said that he could be treated as nothing more than a soldier, if necessary. At that moment, Corrin remembered his master and the noble sacrifice she had made for him. Now it was his turn to repay that and protect everything. Later, Josephine met with the real Aaron and made it clear that she was against that decision. Aaron replied that Tate's Baltazar was still alive and questioned whether they could truly trust that child. She herself knew that she should not trust others so easily. The decision was to observe Corrin for the time being. Aaron was aware that she carried an enormous responsibility and that she could not decide everything impulsively. Corrin's words could be lies, but something in her hesitated. His eyes were sad and sincere, like those of someone who had lost something very important. Aaron thought that the child would certainly become someone special in the future. Sometime later, during the Merkaba Academy summer vacation ceremony, ranks were reassigned according to the students' performance. That ceremony had a special meaning. The rank received upon entering the academy was temporary, but the new rank granted there became official. While the ceremony took place, some students were bored and others extremely nervous. Even so, everyone knew that the reassignment could change everything. Depending on the rank received, even students could exercise rights equivalent to those of guardians. The veterans handed out potatoes, and this time, not only to Marott. Soon, the names of the students whose ranks would be adjusted began to be announced. The first called was the second-year student, Speaker of the Magic Department, Marott Dunaleff. Despite having faced unfortunate incidents, she proved to possess an indomitable spirit and made invaluable contributions to preventing a terrible accident in the laboratory. In terms of external missions, her performance that semester was almost non-existent, since she could not leave the Forbidden City after becoming a vampire. Even so, she achieved several accomplishments by assisting in Professor Dana's research. The massive increase in her mana after the transformation also contributed significantly to her new rank. In addition, she played an important role in the fight against the Iron Mountain King. With the recommendation of all the officers of Merkaba Academy, Marott was promoted to the semi-special ranking. Everyone was impressed to realize that she was the youngest student in history to reach that level. The director explained that the next names called had also made great contributions. The laboratory incident was recognized as an event of great impact, although many details had been omitted. The existence of the Iron Mountain King and Fermax's betrayal remained secret. Even so, Cranell Luden, Yuel, Alicia Harden, Dronworski, and Corin Locke were called to the stage. Yuel, Cranell, Alicia, and Dronworski were promoted to the semi-special ranking due to their actions during the incident. Finally, the director announced Corin Locke. Even as a 5th-rank Guardian, he demonstrated brilliant performance and exceptional achievements. With the recommendation of all the professors, the director, and Senior Josephine, he was promoted directly to 1st-rank Guardian. The audience was completely shocked. Corin had entered the academy as a 5th rank and reached 1st rank in just one semester. The rank granted to Corin was not entirely official at that moment, as certain matters had been discussed behind the scenes. His abilities were unquestionable, but his promotion also ensured silence regarding Fermax's betrayal, as well as the fact that Corin had defeated him. Most important were the special rights granted to a 1st-rank Guardian. Corin felt that he was finally truly starting the game. In the 3rd year, this would make a huge difference. In addition, he would have access to the best resources and people under his command. His intuition was excellent. With the beginning of the vacation, Corin asked the group what each of them planned to do. Dronworski said he would make money. Yeager stated that he would visit his family. Lark commented that he would do an internship at the Magic Tower. Yuel said she planned to travel with other druids, and Cranell stated that he would follow the same path, since the old castle would be demolished, and that would be a great opportunity to build a core. Alicia explained that she needed to return home, as her grandfather had summoned her. Corin wished everyone a good trip. He himself would not return home. He had already tried to do that back then. The place he returned to using Corin Locke's memories was empty. His family had decided to take a trip without him, all because of a system error that delayed the correspondence. He ended up making the trip in vain. Alicia asked whether Corin would like to go with her to her family's home. She explained that it would be frightening to travel alone. Corin thought that this suited her personality and did not recall any problem related to that in the game. Even so, he decided to leave it for another time, as he needed to go elsewhere. At that moment, Marott approached as he reflected that he needed to leave the academy. If he did not depart at that time of year, he would not be able to reach the destination he sought. Meanwhile, inside a train carriage, several bandits were preparing an attack. They approached all the passengers and demanded cooperation, threatening to use the strength of a semi-special rank combatant. Corin realized they had shown up at the wrong moment. One of the bandits, a bald man, placed a sword against his neck and ordered him to stay still. Corin answered with a single direct strike to the chin. The impact was so strong that the bandit was launched upward, breaking through the roof of the carriage and opening a hole. The other criminals were completely confused by what they had just witnessed. From that moment on, Corin could officially consider himself a 1st-rank Guardian. He had always possessed the necessary power, but now he could exercise it openly. After that, he passed through the secret bookstore of Merkaba Academy and once again found the grimoire of the Persistent Warrior's Regeneration. He read the story recorded there. The author described a warrior on the brink of death, with his body pierced and his organs exposed. Even so, the man used his own intestines to tie himself to a rock and remain standing. When someone asked whether they should cut his throat to end his suffering, the warrior replied that it would be more serious if he could not get a cup of water to quench his thirst. The man respected that courage, gathered water from a lake with his hands, and offered it to him. Soon after, something extraordinary happened, and all of the warrior's wounds healed completely. When Corin finished reading, he was confused by one detail and wondered why the warrior had tied himself with his own intestines. Even so, he considered it a good story. At that moment, Duke Sabancia, possessing Lark's body, asked whether the castle in the south was still intact. Corin confirmed that it was. The Duke said that if Corin ever passed through there, he should look in his old office. There was still something important hidden there, something he would need to find on his own. The Duke showed respect for Corin, calling him a runic sorcerer, and said he hoped Corin had the courage of that ancient warrior. With enough courage, nothing would be impossible. The Duke stated that the man was humble and had promised to save the world, not as a hero or a sage, but as someone who chose not to run away when he had the chance. That was why he respected him. Before leaving Lark's body, the Duke thanked Corin for telling the truth about his wife and his daughter. For that reason, Corin was now heading toward the southern plains. He decided to visit the castle of the former Duke Sabantia. During the journey, the train conductor deeply thanked Corin and Marott, saying that without them the bandits would not have been captured. He also handed Corin a small reward, which Corin accepted politely. In addition, Corin received a reward from the commandment of not closing his eyes to the misfortune of others, gaining 2 points in all attributes. Thus, they continued toward the southern plains. All the carriages passing through the area were heading to the great southern city, the city of Lef, but the trip would take at least 8 hours. Because of that, Marott guided Corin to the transfer station, which functioned as a wyvern landing zone. Corin had used that type of transport several times in his past life. It was more comfortable and faster than carriages, as well as much more expensive. Even Sihu considered the price absurd. However, Marott possessed a special privilege from her family. They would use a massive eagle whose cost was equivalent to 12 viens, an elite vehicle capable of transporting up to an entire house. While they were being seated, several people worked around them, cleaning the landing zone and preparing everything to receive her. The princess was returning. When the eagle landed along with the entire flying palace, an army of servants congratulated Miss Marott on her vacation and bowed to her as a princess. Corin realized, a bit late, something he should have noticed before. The destination was the city of Lef, and to the east was the city of Duna. Her surname was Dunalef, which finally made sense to him. During the journey, Corin tried to understand the scale of her family's harvests. Marott explained that she was not completely sure, but estimated around 6 million. He thought she meant square meters, and commented that it was already impressive, but she calmly corrected him. In fact, it was 6 million hectares, which was equivalent to 60 billion square meters. The magnitude of that made the size of the family's influence clear. Marietti's family, known as the Dunalef family, was part of the most influential lineage in the south. They controlled halls, markets, postal services, agricultural cooperatives, and many other businesses. The signs seen during the carriage ride confirmed this. It was neither exaggeration nor performance. Soon after, they arrived at the great Dunalef family residence. Corin asked why she had never said she was so wealthy. Marott replied that the ones who were rich were her parents, not her. Corin thought that was typical of rich people, but the head butler, Paul, approached at that moment and commented that one day she would inherit all of it, once again treating her as a princess. Paul asked for the luggage to be collected and asked who the young man beside her was. Marott explained that he was Corin, a freshman at the academy and a close friend. The butler then commented naturally that for generations the family had welcomed sons-in-law and that they could offer great support and a place within the Dunalef family businesses. He also reminded them that Marott, known as the Flower of the South for her beauty and intelligence since a young age, had enough suitors to form an army. Corin understood the message and chose not to comment. Later, Corin asked about the castle that had been mentioned before. Marott said she had heard that someone had recently bought it. Paul confirmed this and explained that the new owner was a man named Kos. Corin remembered that in his past life, the Duke's castle had also belonged to that same man, a merchant from an archipelago in the far south, known for his despicable character. At that time, he and Siru had spent the entire night fighting a great sea serpent to obtain permission to enter the castle, facing enormous hardship. Thinking about this, Corin wondered whether he would have to go through all that suffering again. Marott reassured him, explaining that she had already informed Kos in advance, which would allow the visit without problems. Kos had quickly agreed, saying they could come whenever they wanted, and that he would even organize a party on Friday. The decision was made for them to go together. To Corin, it all seemed absurdly convenient. He realized that the mission would be much easier with Marott by his side, since without her, the one in charge would be someone completely despicable. Then Marott suggested that they go shopping the next day, as they would need proper clothes for the party. Corin agreed without hesitation. The next day on Marott Street, they bought a suit for 3 gold coins, a necklace and shoes for 6 gold coins, everyday clothes for 4 gold coins, as well as a watch and jewelry, all paid with a check. Corin thought that amount would have been enough to make him rich in his old life, and asked whether she intended to make him pay everything back later. Marott only commented that there was still one last shop to visit. She explained that she had reserved a special item at the blacksmith and showed Corin the same minerals used in Alicia's weapon, something he could not obtain anywhere else, not even at the academy. It was the unbreakable stone. Unlike refined silver, which could not endure inside domains, that rock became even more powerful under those conditions. Corin asked where she had obtained it, since there should not be any market for that material there. Marott explained that if he coated his spear with the unbreakable stone, he would be able to use it without problems even inside a domain. She said that this would be her last gift, because seeing him happy made her happy as well. Corin thanked her deeply. Later, Corin was introduced to Mariott's father and mother. When visiting a friend's house, it was customary to have dinner with the family, but that situation was far from feeling like a simple casual dinner. Mariott's father, named Marty Dunalev, approached and said he needed to ask a question before the meal, because depending on the answer, dinner might or might not take place. He asked whether Corin was a virgin, leaving him completely confused and unable to react immediately. Mariott's mother intervened at once, scolding her husband and saying there was absolutely no need to ask such a question. Corin thought it was already clear that this would not be a calm dinner. Marta Dunalev stated directly that his daughter was not available and that Corin could not marry her. Before he could continue, Mariette punched her father's head hard against the table. Even in that situation, Mard commented that she looked very much like her mother when she did that. But Mariette told him to shut up. While being dragged out of the hall by his own daughter, Marty kept saying that he only wanted to protect her. Mariette's mother apologized to Corin for what had happened and explained that she already knew quite a lot about him through her daughter's letters. She said that she truly wanted to meet him and thanked him from the bottom of her heart for everything he had done. Corin replied respectfully, saying that he had ended up in a complicated position and had only done what he could. Above all, he believed Mariette deserved to be happy. The Duchess agreed. While reading her daughter's letters, she had noticed that Mariette was seeing the world differently and commented that this was to be expected from someone like Corin, which made Marty complain that he could still hear them. Even so, Marty declared that he was grateful for what Corin had done, but imposed that at most they could walk holding hands, since it was necessary to preserve his daughter's virginity. He was struck again, this time by Mariette and by his own wife at the same time. The Duchess commented that, unlike that man, she was a bit more liberal. Corin thought that, despite everything, it was a strangely happy and united family. The next day at the Duke's castle, Count Cassius received Mariette with great enthusiasm, saying that the Blandria family was very grateful for her visit. Corin realized with surprise that it was the same man from his past life, something that still felt hard to believe. They were received with great respect, wearing extremely elegant formal attire. Corin felt sincere pride. If he had not saved Mariette, he would never have seen her like that. More than that, the South would have lost its most beloved princess. People began to murmur when they saw her, commenting on her importance and on the reason the Count had personally brought her. For Corin, it was no exaggeration to say that the influence of the Dunalev family in the South was absolute. Using Mariette as a pass was far more efficient than facing a sea serpent. He suggested that they enjoy the party a bit before going to the office. Both had brought their equipment. When the celebration reached its peak and everyone was distracted, they would retrieve it to deal with what they needed to resolve. At that moment, a young man named Garley from the Rondinium family approached, saying that he had always admired Mariette and inviting her to dance. He was not the only one, as several other men also offered. Even so, the one who drew the most attention was Corin. Despite the general excitement, most of those men lacked proper manners. Corin kissed the back of Mariette's hand and asked for the first dance. At balls, it was basic etiquette for the first dance to be with one's partner, something he had forgotten in his past life, and for which he had been reprimanded. Mariette turned completely red and accepted without hesitation. While they danced to the sound of a beautiful symphony, Corin commented that she was very popular and wondered whether he had been imprudent, apologizing in case she had felt uncomfortable. Mariette replied that it had been unexpected, but that she had liked it very much. Corin felt that he was returning the favor to the one who had saved him, since he had received so much from her. Even so, the situation was delicate, as the two of them were very close. To resolve the awkward moment, Mariette stepped hard on his foot with her heel and apologized, admitting that she was not very good at dancing. Corin replied that it was fine. Corin thought that perhaps it would be better for him to lead the dance. He moved closer and whispered in Mariette's ear, asking her to let him take command. He said that for now, all she needed to do was look at him, her partner, feel the rhythm, and enjoy the moment. Mariette followed his movements, and the dance became dazzling. Their trembling gazes sought one another to find balance, because a dance was something done together, never alone. Both laughed, enjoyed themselves, and shared a moment that felt like a dream. After the dance, Mariette was tired, very warm, and her face was completely red. Corin led her outside the hall, while several men watched with anger and envy. Other women commented that Mariette had danced practically with her feet on top of his, saying that it had been extremely romantic and that she had left with a different kind of smile, as if it had been something very special for her. After that, they passed through the room where the equipment was kept and went straight to Duke Sabancia's office. Mariette asked what exactly they were looking for there. Corin replied that it did not matter much, since he himself did not know for sure. He only said that he was looking for traces of the Duke. He took the first book from the shelf that caught his attention, which spoke about the Duke's history in the game. There were records of his wife Luina and his daughter Cecilia, traces that normally had to be found by the player during the Duke's Sabancia quest. Under normal circumstances, delivering that to the Duke would end the quest, but in his past life, there had been no indication that the office should be investigated. Even so, he decided to search carefully. After a long time, they found nothing relevant. Corin had not gathered any evidence, and Marott had commented that she was hungry, looking at him in a very specific way. That look had already become a natural signal between the two, created as their relationship developed. Marott ended up sitting on his lap, remarking that she sometimes found his jaw and collarbone very beautiful, and then fed on his blood. When she finished, she asked whether it hurt. Corin replied that perhaps because of his tolerance to pain, he did not feel anything. At that moment, he remembered something important. That resistance came from an ability he had received through a grimoire given by Duke Sabancia. He asked Marott if she could summon Duke Go. When the creature appeared, Corinne asked for it to be summoned in a partially translucent form. Duke Go cried a little, but managed to comply, slowly beginning to fade. When it entered a spiritual state, Corin could no longer see it since he could not see spirits, but he felt an intense chill drawing closer. A spirit enveloped him, pulling him into a world of shadows. In that instant, Corin finally understood everything. What had been sealed inside the grimoire in the Great Library was the spirit of Duke Sabancia. Unable to die and consumed by the desire for blood, the Duke had separated body and soul. The body was now standing before him. The Duke's body asked who the person was who had come to visit the traces of his soul and what had brought him to the castle. Corin introduced himself as a distant descendant of his soul. The Duke commented that his appearance was not bad and that he seemed like an ordinary person. Corin said that he had seen his soul and was curious about something. If body and soul had been separated, how did he still seem normal there? The Duke immediately interrupted, saying that he was the one asking the questions and that Corin only needed to answer.